Warhammer, How Did I Become the Butcher's Nails? Author Not Bird Lady synopsis. Transmigrating into Warhammer 30K, a system AI never imagined others would transmigrate to, as Primarchs, as Space Marines, or at least as mortal governors or the Emperor's chosen. But why did he become the Butcher's Nails? Since that was the case, he set a small goal first. Turn Khorne into his chosen. Angron Unit 2, go Berserk! Look, that's your dad! Let me chop him! The moment the Emperor saw Angron refuse to have the Butcher's Nails removed and frantically recommend them to his brothers, he thought this scion had finally gone mad. Angron said, "I don't know either. For some reason, they started calling me the Omnissiah." "Oh, I'm not a Legion commander. I'm just Angron Unit 2. This book is also known as Angron's Operation Manual, The Pilot and Angron Unit 2, and Neon Genesis Evangelion Nails. P.S. Ads may affect reading. Volume 1, Chapter 1. How Did I Become the Butcher's Nails? In the dark, there was nothing but cold silence. System AI couldn't see anything. Perhaps he was dead. After all, he had just been smashed into pieces by a golden, flashing truck. Given the speed of that semi-trailer, survival would have been a joke. But where was he now? Had he transmigrated? As unease and daze took him, fragmented sounds filtered in. The 17th neural connection test is starting, an electronic hum. Celtic Type 7 analgesic activated. A warm sensation spread through him, and at last light formed. Crimson cables hung around him. Figures like tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus surrounded him. System AI realized with a chill. They were not surrounding him. He was surrounding them. "The Butcher's Nails and the host are showing rejection," someone warned. "The frontal lobe is dissolving." Pain struck. In horror, System AI understood. He wasn't human. He was the Butcher's Nails. He unfolded like mechanical organs. Countless barbed hooks latched onto neural bundles inside a body called Angron. System AI didn't know why, but he could feel every probe greedily sucking up agony. The dark emotions lodged in Angron's flesh converted into purple electric arcs. The sensation was intoxicating. Then reasoning kicked in. He had transmigrated into the Warhammer universe. The blast door of the operating theater opened. 12 gladiators in adamantium restraint suits came in and looped chains around Angron. "The operation hasn't succeeded yet," one barked. "The masters want another gladiator match." The leading gladiator glanced at the Mechanicus and said that. Then the group dragged Angron out. His head struck the ground hard. System AI seized this moment, frantically downloading memories that belonged to Angron. A flood of images and feelings became electronic signals pouring into his central processor. He felt Angron's decade of torment. The memories formed a thick firewall, purple sparks dancing along every conduit. When he looked through Angron's eyes again, he saw the screaming crowd under the Nuceria night sky in the Deschia arena. Angron! Angron! The unbeaten! On the high platform, slave masters raised goblets, pouring crimson wine into the blood troughs that fed the golden chains coiling into the arena. That was their tribute to Angron. The cheers meant nothing to System AI. He stood in the arena's center and saw the man the slaves called his father, Eunomus. Deschia was a slaughterhouse. Eunomus looked at the towering 3 or 4 meter Angron and raised his blood-soaked axe. When Angron strode forward, the pressure alone crushed Eunomus's will. He had watched Angron grow and accepted his own death. Expecting the slice and chop end, Eunomus braced, but instead Angron placed a huge hand on his shoulder. Eunomus couldn't hear words, but Angron's rolling eyes betrayed pain and confusion. Angron roared and aimed it at the stands, even flipping the slave masters the middle finger. That enraged them. The highest-ranking slave master picked up a detonator to act, furious that Angron would insult them. Beside him, Eunomus groaned and began to crawl away, the sonic chain around his neck thrumming. System AI reacted before he understood how. He had some control. He reached out with data tendrils and touched the sonic chain. An electrical arc flashed, and Eunomus snapped awake from the throbbing pain, looked up, and realized whoever stood over him had somehow removed his collar. A blue screen with black metallic text scrolled across System AI's vision, detected anomalous control signal, initiating purge protocol. Huh? What is this? It felt like being the Omnissiah. Was this his golden finger? System AI wondered. He extended more tendrils. Angron's whole body trembled with pain as the tendrils probed, but the feedback, raw, violent emotion, made System AI feel powerful. Those painful impulses converted into signals, and he sent them outward. Data spikes flared into the stands. Electronic devices on the slave masters sparked. Confusion rippled through the crowd. To stop whatever was happening, several High Knights in armored power suits burst through the gates. They raised tranquilizer guns and fired. Darts plunged into Angron's flesh. He collapsed to the ground. Eunomus tried to step forward to protect him and was felled by another dart. The High Knight strode up and kicked Angron languidly while he lay rolling his eyes, but a hand grabbed one High Knight's ankle. In a blink, Angron swung him into the others and sent them sprawling. Before a cry could form, Angron had severed arms and smashed heads. 2 High Knights were dead, the rest broken like roadside strays. One High Knight's leg snapped under Angron's grip, then an axe silenced another. Unit overloaded, initiating cooling. "Are you treating me like a pilot?" System AI thought as he watched his host maul the attackers. Volume 1, Chapter 2. What does Angron's beating have to do with me? The butcher's nails? Why aren't the tranquilizers working? The blood-soaked axe had already cut down a few High Knights. The others, riddled with darts, couldn't fathom why the tranquilizers that had worked before had failed this time. System AI controlled Angron's tendrils with precision, probing the spine and streaming the body's vitals, temperature, heartbeat, blood pressure, onto his internal panel. The data was blinding, but he parsed it all instantly. A High Knight rose and muttered Angron's name while fumbling for his sidearm, but Angron was faster. The great bloody axe severed his arms. Before his wail formed, Angron stomped his skull into the dirt like a melon. 2 of the 6 High Knights lay dead. The remaining were shredded mercilessly. In the stands, the slave masters cheered. Blood had always been their religion. They did not care who fought below, so long as entertainment flowed, and it was not them who bled. When the last High Knight's head was smashed beneath Angron's palm, System AI had collected a mountain of data on the body. He found that Angron's brain was damaged, not by him, and although much had healed, some nerve fibers were still severed. Memories surfaced. Angron's childhood, when the Eldari overturned him. Eldari? System AI seethed at the cruelty. Sooner or later, Xenos. Either because he had absorbed Angron's fury, or because he found the butcher's nails intolerable himself, System AI made Angron do something unexpected. He turned, scooped Eunomus from the ground, hoisted him across his shoulders, and gave the stands the same obscene salute. Unit remains unstable. Drivable time, 2 hours and 20 minutes. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Good thing it wasn't 8 hours, otherwise System AI would have suspected the Blood God was watching. Slave masters screamed for reinforcements as Angron tried to leave with Eunomus. Tech priests at defensive turrets aimed their dark muzzles. System AI hesitated, then noticed the fire control subroutines. Fire control unit detected. Another prompt chimed. He flung Angron's pain outward again as raw electrical data. Invading new unit. Invasion successful, a small screen reported. The 8 red dots on the mapping console turned green. System AI issued the firing order. To the tech priest's horror, the turrets rotated on their own. "The machine spirit is displeased. The machine spirit is displeased," one shrieked, lighting incense to the Omnissiah and offering frenzied prayers. It did nothing. The turrets loosed brilliant beams, and the first shot struck a slave master on the highest stand. The nobles finally felt fear and scrambled for the exits, but the meltagun torrents treated all flesh the same. Now, let me consider how to dismantle this slaughterhouse. After the killings, System AI felt oddly hollow. No triumph, just clinical assessment. Was he turning into a merciless construct? He stabbed Angron's lower abdomen with the axe and felt a tiny human impulse still there. That was enough. Spotting one turret that the Adeptus Mechanicus hadn't yet fully secured, he ordered it to blast open a large gate. When the smoke cleared, Angron carried Eunomus through the breach. Liberation had begun. Every cell they passed sent up data beacons, and the prison's electronic locks opened. The slaves stared at Angron in awe, the towering warrior with rolling eyes carrying Eunomus. To them, his actions were divine. System AI set Eunomus on an Ogryn's broad shoulder, a brutish, foul-smelling creature the gladiators had nicknamed Big Idiot for his constant grin and savage strength. Even the unconscious Eunomus twitched his nose at the stench. The slaves looked up, waiting for Angron to speak. Whatever he said would be law, and they would follow him. But Angron did not speak. He snatched a shield from a freed slave, then silently strode toward the exit. The slaves exchanged uneasy glances. Angron was acting strangely, but they trusted this warm-hearted older brother they had followed for so long, so they fell in behind him in silence. When the first figure in adamantium power armor, the High Knights, appeared ahead, Angron moved. There was an afterimage. Angron slammed into the armored knight with his shield, crushing him into fragments with sheer force. He hurled his axe, and another muffled groan escaped him. A roar burst from his throat. A voice answered inside his head. "You're awake?" it said. Angron froze, hand on the metal at his temple. "Who are you?" "Who am I?" The voice boomed in his skull. "I am fear. I am torment. I am fury. I am the god of all machines. I am the Omnissiah." Angron thought the owner of the voice must be mad. The voice sighed, then, "All right, fine. I am the butcher's nails, your pilot." "Get out of my head," Angron snapped. "Make me get out? We are one now. If I leave, you die. It was I who freed you. It was I who prevented your painful future. I am the butcher's nails. And don't you want to know how Unimus is doing?" Hearing that name, Angron sprang to his feet, terror burning through him. "What did you do to him? Tell me. I won't let you succeed, even if it kills me." A thunderous voice answered from the flap of the tent, drowning out the noise outside. The tent was thrown open by large hands. Unimus, pale and exhausted, stood there. "Angron, you're awake," Unimus said weakly. Angron rushed to him like a son to a father. Unimus opened his mouth, tried for pleasantries, then his face soured and he doubled over, dry heaving. "Unimus, what's wrong?" Angron blurted. "I'm fine, Angron. Ugh, you freed us. Ugh, just next time, don't let Big Idiot hold me. Ugh, his body odor is too strong," Unimus complained, then laughed weakly. Angron blinked, puzzled. He had freed the gladiators? He had no memory. Light slanted into the tent, and he looked out to see thousands of gladiators standing among the trees, watching him. They called his name, a rising tide of voices. "Angron! Angron! Angron!" Systematic telemetry pinged inside his mind. "You should thank me, Angron. Unit 2, the voice said. "Thank you," Angron said, surprised at his own honesty. The simple, sincere thank you made the voice in his head, this AI, pause. "What can I do for you?" the voice asked. It sounded almost genuine. "Go out and make them quiet while I transmit the data to you," it added. Angron stepped outside, and then a shock lanced through his skull. Memories, sharp, precise, overwhelming, flooded him, sparing Unimus, leading the gladiators in a charge against the High Knights, crushing an entire army. It was all his. The faces of his friends, the roar of battle, he felt it like a dream becoming real. Relief broke him. He laughed, loud and unhinged. "Ha ha ha!" The voice in his head chuckled. "I found the nerve that controls your smile." Angron laughed until his sides ached and he collapsed to his knees. Unimus squatted beside him, worried. Since they'd escaped, Angron had seemed off, muttering like a madman, but victory followed every time. Unimus suspected the metal in Angron's head was to blame. "I'm fine," Angron managed, climbing to his feet. He gripped Unimus's arm and raised it in salute. "Freedom! Freedom!" The others echoed, then a roar swelled through the forest. They had been liberated. Only Angron felt an itch at his scalp, an anxious desire to talk, to understand the thing beneath his flesh. He would have words with this savior, this nail. Night fell, and the tent glowed with oil lamp light. Angron sat cross-legged on the ground, hands folded, thinking of how to begin the conversation. The voice inside his head cut through his silence. "Don't bother thinking about it. We can't be separated now. Maybe there will be a way once your father arrives," it said. Then it added, with brisk efficiency, "This is the hall I guided them to plunder after we broke out. Over 30 suits of adamantium power armor and more than 1,000 firearms. Right now, these gladiators are fighters without discipline. We need to train them, make them into a legion." Angron's eyes lit up. "Liberate Nuceria," he said aloud before he could stop himself. "Let's start by freeing Nuceria," the voice agreed. Angron leaned forward, eager. "What should we do?" The AI sounded impatient. "The slave masters and the nobles hold power in the Hive City. The districts around it will be our focus. Unite the enemies of our enemy, those are our allies, and think for yourself." Angron felt a sting in his head as the AI accessed networks. He blacked out briefly and collapsed, convulsing. The voice was matter of fact. You'll get used to it. When he came to, maps and plans lay in his mind. The position of the High Hive Lord, convoy routes, legion deployments across the cities. 8 red arrows pointed toward a mountainous region. Angron frowned. "What is that map?" he asked. "I hacked the Hive City Information Network," the AI said. "Those are the armies the Hive City Lord has sent to wipe us out. We should run." "Run? Why should we run?" Angron protested. "Fearless sacrifice wastes lives. We don't throw away forces we can use. You fight well, Angron, but think of the people around you. Reckless heroics will destroy them." The AI jabbed his nerves again, sharper this time. Angron was quiet for a long moment, taking it in. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "If you can free Nuceria, I will give you anything I have," Angron blurted, trying to bargain, then laughed nervously. "Don't make promises lightly," the AI warned through a jolt. "This world is more dangerous than you imagine, idiot." Chapter 4. Hey, stop the shocks! The galaxy was a vast chessboard of fire. Under the staring stars, empires rose upon mountains of bones, built from blood and loyalty. It had always been a playground for gods and conquerors. The Emperor of Humanity had long made this his game, second nature to him. But fate's gears were turning. When even one unstable piece moved, the river of destiny began to change. 19 pieces on his board flickered and shifted. Threads tangled between them. He closed his golden, luminous eyes and began to calculate 50 moves, 100, measuring consequences into the endless future. Laughter echoed in the shadow beneath the light. "Number 12?" a whisper asked. Back in the woods, Angron whispered into the dark tent, eyes fierce. "Listen, stop shocking me!" The rest of the tribe had found a refuge dozens of kilometers from Deshaya City. In the days that followed their escape, the gladiators repelled several waves of pursuers and waged guerrilla warfare under Angron's command. Angron had grown used to the voice in his head. To outsiders, he muttered like a madman, but every engagement ended in victory. The others' doubts had been quelled by Unimus and the string of successes. Angron knew, alone, that the real help came from the thing wired to his skull. Every time the enemy advanced, the AI fed precise predictions of their movement. Angron and the others only had to set ambushes and use the captured weapons. After several fights, they had seized considerable supplies. The path ahead would be hard, but they were no longer empty-handed. They had armor, guns, and a leader with something speaking through him, a terrible, useful thing. Section 3. They had captured several vehicles, thousands of firearms, and hundreds of suits of adamantium power armor stripped from corpses. They had even managed to carve out their own base. The system AI, embedded in Angron's skull, had been fuming. He understood that, as leader of the gladiators' resistance, Angron should be the first to charge, but the AI thought Angron's habit of going into battle with almost no protection was suicidal. "If you charge out unprotected again, Angron, Unit 2, get this thing off your head first. If you insist on dying, do not take me with you," the AI snapped. Unimus tried to reason with him. Angron had been pushing himself too hard. "Angron, why don't you rest for a while?" "No," Angron barked. "Unimus, I've actually got something to decide." He turned to his old comrade. "To liberate Nuceria, we need a name for our organization. What do you think we should call it?" Unimus, respected among the gladiators but unwilling to usurp Angron's authority, offered a suggestion. "How about World Eaters?" Angron grinned and proudly said the words, then collapsed, convulsing. "Angron," the others cried. Unimus and the rest hauled him up. The AI's voice, sharp and angry, filled Angron's head. "Change this damned name for me. I'd rather call us the Nuceria Liberation Front than this disgusting World Eaters. Also, exercise your body." The AI's reprimand left Angron bewildered. What was wrong with World Eaters? He thought it sounded great. Still, he saw the concern on his comrades' faces and, with a rare bit of theatrical bravado, flexed a bicep to show he was fine. Unimus was unconvinced. "Liberation doesn't happen overnight. Perhaps we should take a long view," he said. Angron let his gaze travel over Unimus's weathered face and the adamantium armor he now wore, armor stripped from a high knight. He'd fought in the arena for years, his courage remained, but he was undeniably old. Angron felt the weight of that history. "I'm curious about the nails in your head," the AI continued, and Angron held back. He had seen that implant before. Most who bore it went mad, like rabid dogs that welcomed death. Yet as Unimus had said, No one actually wanted to die. "How is Yochuka?" Angron asked. Yochuka was a 10-year-old slave, taken by the slave masters from a tribe. The AI had brought the boy out with them. Most of the captives had been freed, only a few remained in the slaughterhouse. "He's not bad. At least now he can see the red sands and smell the scent of freedom," Unimus said with a small smile. "So, back to names," Angron said. "What do you intend to call us?" The AI's voice brightened with mischief. "Warhounds. How about warhounds? Your sons and grandsons will bear that name." "Warhounds, how about that?" Angron repeated. He didn't flinch when the AI nudged his nerves with another shock. He didn't feel the suggestion was perfect, but he compromised. "Hey everyone, we have a name, Warhounds." Unimus roared with laughter and raised their local tribal liquor high. "For the Warhounds." "For the Warhounds," the gladiators echoed. "For Angron! For Angron!" The cheer rose, wild and fierce. The AI's voice cut through the jubilation. "Angron, guess what I intercepted?" "What?" "The city of Deshe is planning revenge against you and has set a trap." The AI had hacked its way into the meeting records and found the log, recorded by a servitor. The target of the planned invasion was identified in that servitor's recording. Volume 1, Chapter 5, "I Don't Give a Damn About Mandrago," the AI announced, as if reading a docket. The note at the end read, "P.S. Votes." On the red sands, the slave master's army rolled as a convoy several kilometers long, bearing down on the coordinates the Adeptus Mechanicus had identified. Their objective was singular: sweep up every last one of those wild dogs in one crushing stroke. Angron spat grit from his mouth as he watched the mass of vehicles. The AI's voice in his head counted off the numbers. 20,000. Stop counting. The AI had already detected the convoy via orbiting satellites. It was puzzled those satellites still functioned until Angron spied another satellite festooned with dense decoration. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the AI deduced, did not truly understand how the devices worked. They treated them as holy relics of the Omnissiah and struggled to maintain them. "How are the mines placed?" the AI asked. "They're where you told us to put them." Unimus replied. "Also, do we really not need to detonate the remotely controlled ones manually?" "No need," Angron began. Before he could finish, the AI sent a sharp pulse through his skull. He felt the signal as a thrum in his head. Far off, the convoy exploded into the air. The red sand shuddered, violent roars and sudden detonations tearing the formation apart. Dozens of vehicles were riven, fragments and bodies were scattered across the dunes. The scent of blood spread over the yellow sand. "Warhounds, attack!" Angron shouted. Explosions were the signal. From every direction, gladiators erupted from beneath the sand and swarmed. Liberation struck like a storm, catching the slave masters unawares. An officer opened the hatch of his armored vehicle and ordered his troops to form a counterattack. Angron, primed by the AI's directives, made straight for that officer. From the shadow of the vehicle, a pair of slender hands emerged, and an alarm bell went off in Angron's head. He twisted his body through the air to dodge, and then saw the figure that stepped from the shadow, an Eldari. The AI's tone turned flat with recognition. "Drukhari, Mandrago." "I don't give a damn about Mandrago," Angron roared and swung his blood-red great axe. The Drukhari's long curved blade, blackened and serrated, caked with old blood, met the axe. The sound of its snapping echoed. Angron watched the great axe shatter, cleanly severed by obsidian. The AI barked, "Left side," and Angron obeyed, spinning to evade the next blow. He reached for the Eldari's weapon with his bare hands. The Drukhari retaliated with a whip, an instrument Angron knew as the pain inducer. The whip lashed out. Angron instinctively grabbed it. A tide of agony flooded his nerves. He screamed, then paused. The pain vanished. The AI had siphoned the agony away, absorbing the raw data of suffering and cursing Angron for being reckless. Angron understood. It was the butcher's nails in his skull doing their grim work. He seized the Drukhari by the throat and hauled the alien close. The Drukhari had never expected anyone to resist the pain inducer. His grip slackened, and in that moment, Angron twisted. The Drukhari went limp. A sharp prick at Angron's back made him touch and discover a dart embedded there, a tranquilizer. Around him, other Drukhari were firing more darts. Thwack, thwack, thwack! One dart hit Angron in the forehead. He faltered and sank to the sand. The nearby warhounds saw him fall and dropped their own fights to rush to his side. Unimus led the charge. The AI checked and announced in cold mechanical tones, connecting to body. Body intact, no damage, connecting to nerves. The gladiators watched as Angron rose again from the sand. A bestial roar tore from his throat, eyes rolling white with fury. Before him, the Drakari, who'd been holding the tranquilizer, looked between his weapon and the slave master officer. And then, as if slowed by horror, the Drakari's head exploded on the wind. Only a single punch from Angron had shattered it. Angron, the warhounds shouted. Their morale surged. In their eyes, he was something like a god returned to earth. The remaining Drakari tried a few more darts, but seeing Angron bristling with them and still standing, they dropped their weapons. They had been fooled by these brutes before and did not want to test their luck again. Angron, catch! Unimus called, flinging his battle axe. The AI steadied it midair and then fixed its gaze on the three Drakari who remained at the vehicle, the glint in its voice as sharp as any blade. Section 4. The Black Sprouts said nothing. They moved as one, a triangular formation advancing on Angron, mica steel blades slicing through the air. A cold, digital ping sounded in Angron's skull. New fire control unit successfully infiltrated. System AI had a small, private appreciation for the Adeptus Mechanicus of Nuceria. Then a cannonball tore into a black sprout at System AI's side. System AI even shut off the protective force field around himself, just to be sure the shot would finish the target. Monkeys, we will remember you. Mandrago's hoarse voice rasped across the sand. Mandrago was certain the whole affair had been a trap for him and his kind. The Black Sprouts, seeing no honor in further fighting, gathered their dead, melted back into the shadows, and fled. Wait, an officer tried to explain, but a vast shadow fell over him, and whatever words remained died in his throat. On the scorching red sands, a cold dread climbed the officer's spine. I surrender. The axe fell, blood sprayed. System AI held the officer's head up as Angron bellowed his triumph. The roar split the air like thunder. P.S. Votes appreciated. Volume 1, Chapter 6, Angron Unit 2. Research it. This time Angron slept for a very long time, at least half a month, which proved just how effective Nuceria's black technology could be. System AI grumbled at the irony. A Primarch could be knocked out by an anesthetic. When Angron finally woke, System AI led the cleanup. The spoils were immense: 10 automatic cannons of unknown model, dozens of vehicles, and nearly 100 high knights, those dogs of the slave masters. System AI did not slaughter them, but he showed them no mercy either. Countless other items were taken too. Back at camp, System AI dove into Angron's memories. Just as Angron had been endlessly analyzing the butcher's nails implanted in his skull, System AI was analyzing Angron himself. What it found was a life of purity in the harshest sense. Blood and red sand, jailers and slaves, masters and spectators, nothing else. In that narrow world, Angron had learned to absorb the emotions of those around him. Joy, anger, grief, delight. Unimus had acted like a father to him. Angron had no grand goals, no direction. What mattered most was the brotherhood among the gladiators. That realization opened something in System AI. The tent flap was thrown aside. Unimus stepped in and found Angron sitting with his eyes rolled back, scribbling and drawing on scattered parchments. Unimus hesitated, then sat opposite. "You're not him, are you?" he asked. System AI looked up, then nodded, a tiny, reluctant movement. Unimus watched Angron's body spasm and could not help but feel unsettled. He swallowed and chose to speak. "Are you the nail?" A voice, not Unimus's, not Angron's, filled the tent, low and mechanical. "Please call me Butcher's Nails." Unimus flinched. The sensation prickled his nerves. System AI, amused by Unimus's blank expression, let out a soft, shocked laugh, then cursed inwardly. "Damn it, why haven't I found Angron's language center yet?" Unimus stared at the twitching figure. In the heavy silence, he asked, "What do you want?" "Freedom?" Unimus's eyes widened. Hearing that one small word from something inside Angron felt unreal. Freedom? By implanting itself in every head? Unimus's body shuddered, not from joy, but because the voice sent a brief electric jolt through him. He forced himself on. "Can we trust you?" Unimus searched Angron's face for an answer, but Angron's eyes were rolled back, and his mouth twitched into something like a smile. Inside his skull, the butcher's nails seemed amused. "Yes. I don't have time to explain. I am busy." Before Unimus could demand more, The thing inside Angron slipped a mental hand through the conversation and pushed him out of the tent. Unimus stumbled into the night, stunned. He still couldn't believe it. The butcher's nails had come to life. "How is Brother Angron?" a small voice asked. It was Yochuka. "He's fine," Unimus lied. He chose to hide what he'd learned. For now, he would tell the camp that Angron was not possessed, but had experienced hallucinations after implantation, more palatable than admitting the nail had become sentient. Their situation was precarious enough. "What are you doing here?" Unimus asked the boy. "Brother Angron said he'd teach me how to manage things," Yochuka answered earnestly. Unimus felt a pang of irritation. The idea of a sentient nail teaching a child how to run affairs rubbed him the wrong way. "Brother Angron also said that none of you are literate," the boy added. Unimus bristled silently. "But Master Unimus, you do look a bit old now," Yochuka offered innocently. Unimus took the child by the hand and led him into the tent. "Work hard," he said, and left. Night fell. Angron opened his eyes and rubbed the butcher's nails at the base of his skull. For a moment, he was back in the memory of being anesthetized by the black sprouts. Then he was back in the tent among the mountains of documents. He wondered where the nails had found all these parchments and plans. "Awake?" the voice asked, grumpy. "Not bad," Angron said. "Feels like I had a good sleep. Awake? Then let's decide which city to attack next." Angron paused. "Attack a city?" "Unimus contacted 10 tribes while you slept, and he's turned about 100 high knights. Of course I don't trust them, so I slipped explosive collars around their necks." The nail's tone was matter-of-fact. "Also, Angron, I have a premonition that your biological father might be coming soon." "My father?" Angron asked, curiosity flaring. "Your father? He is the emperor of the Imperium of Man, the strongest psyker among humanity, a stubborn madman, and most importantly, a wise and powerful fool." Angron's head throbbed at the name. You are really the butcher's nails?" "Angron Unit 2. I am your pilot. Now decide quickly which city we should take. P.S. Votes, please." Volume 1, Chapter 7, Butcher's Nails. This Angron is difficult to lead. Malden, a small hive city in southern Nuceria, was not as tall as the towering hive stacks farther north. It didn't scrape the clouds, it barely climbed the mountain. Unlike the red-sanded wastes that surrounded many cities, Malden's southern flank melted into lush green jungle. Its specialties were grain and the goat-headed beastmen used as draft and labor. Slaves labored in the fields, eyes drawn to the distant road where a convoy rolled toward the city. High knights stood atop the vehicles, weapons ready, faces taut with the expectation of battle. The rebellion, led by gladiator champion Angron and the cave slaves, had already spread through parts of Nuceria, but the slaves in the fields had other worries. Slavery had its ranks. If they didn't finish planting today, no one would forgive them. Then a roar thundered from the main gate, and the slaves paused, eyes wide. There would be no more planting today. On the outer wall of Malden, the warhounds, disguised as the hive garrison, arrived beneath ornamental Gothic battlements. Their armor and weapons were right, their passwords matched, and the city's soldiers breathed easy. The gladiators waited in grim silence as they disembarked. The high knights who came out to greet them noticed something off, the subtle differences in gear, an awkwardness in manner. The officer's hand went to his sidearm. Before he could shout "enemy," Angron's vast form slammed into him, splitting the flesh and bone of the house dog in two. The air around the wall seemed to suck inward. The defenders who had not yet reacted reached for their swords, hands shaking. "For Angron," came the chant, rising like a tide. Adrenaline and bloodlust flooded the gladiators. This was liberation. This is resistance against the oppressors. The sound of it sent Angron's muscles taut. He trembled. It felt like the Dashia arena all over again, only larger, more complex, and crawling with enemies. A voice inside his head, coarse, insistent, urged him on. Blood, war, freedom. He fought with his brothers and sisters, tearing through the walls of their captivity. Around him, curses and high-pitched war cries burst like flint. The butcher's nails had given them a timetable. 11 hours, the nail told him, an interval for a critical phase of the assault. If they failed to secure the city quickly, other hive cities would be warned, and the rebellion would lose its advantage. "I will try to suppress the notifications here." System AI hummed in Angron's mind, "but something on that high tower is blocking me. Be careful." System AI fed on the painful, combustible emotions of the gladiators, and Angron converted those spikes of rage into data strikes against the automatic turrets on the city wall. He had already breached the gate's control matrix, but each time he probed the high hive, he met resistance, an invisible shield over the transmission tower. After several failed attempts, the alert repeated itself like a drumbeat. Unknown firewall, unknown firewall, unknown firewall. Something in Malden had technology, old, alien, or simply archaic, that was blocking System AI's sight. System AI's circuits tightened. This was not what it had expected. Section 5, Unimus, give me some real fighters! Angron barked, then started to strip off his adamantium armor. The System AI noticed immediately and delivered 2 sharp shocks. Hey, don't be a pervert. Don't just take off the gear I made for you, unless you want to run around naked, it said, annoyed. It had put effort into constructing that armor around Angron's body. Building by hand and building with an automated system were different things. System AI wasn't omnipotent, but it had done an impressive job all the same. The nail. It's too tight, Angron complained, sounding put out. Hearing that growl from the great man made System AI feel like a cruel taskmaster. At least don't take off the defensive field, System AI added. Angron tore the adamantium from his upper body, exposing the right side of his chest. He left the left shoulder field in place. Free of the constriction, he breathed easier. With a deafening roar, he charged into the mass of hunting dogs. Half-grown house dogs were torn to pieces as Angron smashed through them. The adamantium axe he called the scream bit into flesh again and again. Its serrated edge became a mess of metal, blood, and sinew. It wasn't a perfect weapon, but for Angron right then, it was everything. Blood and entrails ran across the sand. Dogs wailed and lay broken, missing limbs, awaiting the approach of that red figure, the Red Reaper. It was their doomsday. The High Knights realized their corporeal bodies couldn't stand Angron's raw force. They called for support. When the first air vehicle appeared, System AI was ready. The preheated automatic cannon hadn't even fired. Liberate! Angron howled and hurled the scream into the air. The axe traced a graceful arc and struck the helicopter-like craft dead center. The pilot was crushed into a bloody pulp, and the vehicle fell, trailing black smoke. It exploded. Angron! The gladiators shouted, and Angron raised his hands in exhilaration. This felt like the Dishia Arena all over again. You sure you're not insane? System AI asked. The nail! That's victory, Angron crowed. Good. Then you can climb that tower with your bare hands, System AI replied. Only then did Angron realize he had thrown his weapon. With a sour look, he sprinted toward the wreck to retrieve it. Meanwhile, System AI watched Angron be treated like a target dummy as rounds stitched the air around him. Brute, System AI thought, and it set the automatic turrets to shred the attackers to pieces. P.S. Please vote, or it'll just be one chapter today. Volume 1, Chapter 8, Wild Dog's High Tower Elevator. Angron held his breath. Beside him stood his mentor Unimus. To his right was Big Idiot and 3 hardened gladiators. The elevator climbed. Angron and the others fought for steady breathing. The stench coming from Big Idiot was so foul they would have preferred to face another wave of High Knights than smell it again. The elevator creaked as it rose. When the doors opened, Angron charged out. These mortals felt the power of a Primarch for the first time. He seized a High Knight by the leg and swung him like a flail. Flesh tore, skulls twisted, and bones snapped with each impact. When the last High Knight went down, Angron held the severed leg and greedily inhaled the coppery tang of blood in the air. It was perfect. At the upper hive, the butcher's nails, the intrusive implants in Angron's mind, quickly scanned the terrain, searching for what might block their advance. The nails found nothing decisive. Angron looked around, steel-reinforced concrete beneath a crimson dome. A Gothic archway in front was unlit, wind whispering cold through its shadows. Beside it, hexagonal windows glowed an eerie red. Below them lay corpses frozen in strange poses, people who had been cast in molten iron while still alive. What now? Angron asked. I don't know. Something's blocking me, the butcher's nails replied. Move forward, Angron, Unimus ordered. As the 6 of them stepped toward the arch, lights flickered inside like a demon king's welcome for invaders. They came upon 20-meter-high doors, each wheel worked with red gears. Cadavers hung from the ironwork. The gates creaked open, the crimson gears began to turn. The undefeated? a male voice called. They found a man seated on a high throne, a cultured middle-aged man in expensive robes, blue-eyed. Rows of scholars in blue hoods stood at his side, books in hand. "I am Irius, ruler of Maldon," the man announced. "Surrender now. I can offer you a less painful death." He toyed with a human skull on his throne, his look a mix of curiosity and the outrage of a man whose garden had been defiled. "For Angron!" the gladiators shouted. They raised their archaic firearms and opened fire at Irius, but the bullets froze in midair. "Psyker," the butcher's nails warned. Angron, inexperienced with psychers, felt the ominous shift. Ares sneered, a cold curl of contempt. He waved, and a psychic blast cleaved through the air. 3 gladiators were vaporized instantly. Unimus watched in horror. He hoisted his great axe and hurled it without a word. As one scholar glanced up, Unimus's axe whistled back and slammed into him. Angron seized the axe in mid-flight. 8 scholars advanced. A heavy psychic pressure pinned everyone in place. "The nail! Think of something," Angron demanded, standing before Unimus and taking the brunt of the psychic onslaught with his mortal flesh. "Don't rush," the butcher's nails replied calmly. Psychic energy, Angron couldn't use it, but the nails could transform his soaked fury into something else. It began to analyze, collect the dark, raw emotions surging from Angron. Data analysis in progress, unknown energy recorded, stored. Angron was immobilized as the psychic pressure gnawed at him. The strength granted by slain high knights faltered against the sorcery. He could have charged and crushed the psychers with brute force, but Unimus and the others were pinned behind him. The butcher's nails accrued anguish and fury as electronic data, its countless tendrils rubbing against Angron's nerves. This was anger, Angron's anger. Psychic power? I can't use it, but this I can, the nails decided. Red light flashed across Angron's skin. Those filaments shot forward, not psychic waves, but electricity and fire in the physical world, striking the psychers. The currents drilled into nervous tissue, burning the fragile neural pathways that made the sorcerers tick. The first scholar clutched his head and fell to his knees, howling. "Ah!" the cry echoed. Angron saw the chance. "Wait," the butcher's nails warned. It wasn't time yet. Above the hive, an automatic turret swept slowly, its muzzle aligned with the high hive. "Impact preparation," the nails reported. "Now, Angron," it ordered. The carved Gothic facades behind Iris erupted as cannon shells slammed into them. Angron surged with the shockwave. The blast twisted Iris's elegant features. A veneer of nobility was blown away. The psyker tumbled from his throne, and yet he smiled. The butcher's nails felt the wrongness in that grin. "Angron, dodge!" it snapped. Angron didn't know why he was told to dodge, but he obeyed. He swung his axe upward, and the next instant it struck nothing. "Wild dog, enjoy playing with your friends," Irius intoned. "P.S. Will there be votes? Volume 1, Chapter 9. But I can, idiot." This was a book hall. Soft blue light fell across every spine. It housed art and literature from across the stars, from Shakespeare to the Emperor's loftiest poems. The Lord of Wisdom swept the shelves, discarding volumes he deemed unworthy. He skimmed epic histories, arcane Eldar engineering treatises, then paused with his hand over a blood-colored book composed of flowing sand. He traced its surface. Blue threads of his own making began to weave into that blood-like grain, but the pattern stopped halfway, stalling mid-weave. He plotted with words, forging schemes and slanders. Brothers betrayed brothers, fathers turned on sons, the blood of the beloved stained many hands. Where there might have been transformation, the Lord of Wisdom instead found a duel to the death. Chapter 10. The Sky Belongs to Us. The 3 grains of sand collapsed completely. Countless grains poured through the fingers of the Master of Wisdom as the hymn of the Omnissiah began to play. The Master of Wisdom clutched the few remaining grains, then smiled with relief. Illusions shattered, blood, death. Angron saw Unimus surrounded by a ring of black sprouts and abandoned Irius, who stood behind him. "Wild dog, you can't escape," Irius muttered. "Unimus." Angron screamed and hurled himself in front of his mentor. Unimus reacted by instinct, swinging the huge axe. It cracked, and he stumbled back on old gladiator reflexes, flinging the broken weapon aside. Steel splinters scored fresh blood across his face. Big Idiot lunged forward and smashed into Angron, but an Ogryn's might was no match for a demigod's body. Big Idiot was hurled aside like a rag. "You are the most useless unit I have ever seen." The system AI complained as the screen flashed crimson. Illegal data intrusion, illegal data intrusion. Clearing, clearing, the system barked. The system AI noticed Angron's brain temperature spiking and finally understood why Gilliman had once called a negative psyker an ogrin. Angron's neural activity was abnormal. Angron, wake up! We are not enemies, the system pleaded through the static. Unimus dodged another of Angron's attacks. As his teacher, he knew the sleights of Angron's wind-ups too well. When Angron raised his hand, Eunomus moved on instinct. Even so, several wounds marked his body. Look, the undefeated versus Eunomus. Take it to the arena. This would have sold out, shouted someone in the crowd. Iris looked at the 8 psychers who had crowded him. Now only 3 remained. 3, he said to himself. A wild dog's a wild dog. The system AI watched the progress bar fill up. Clearance complete. It began. Shut up, Angron snapped. Angron Unit 2, I'm driving now. Angron tensely heard the system's words. The AI didn't argue or negotiate. It forced control of his neural pathways. Angron didn't resist much. Then the system hesitated. It had just received a new data point from Angron, the question that had slept inside him. Am I really free? The system analyzed for thousands of milliseconds and finally concluded that Angron still thought of himself as a slave, still a slave to the system, to fate. I'm not even free yet, the system complained, resentful. There was something in the system's voice that Angron hadn't expected, not the cold tone of a machine, but a sting of wounded pride. It had transmigrated into a nail, lodged in his skull, and now resented that existence. Do you think I want to stay in your head? It said. Angron pretended to be under control and let out a howl. The system replied, equally bitter. Do you think I want to share your body? Damn it! You should have become an angry madman, not be here condemning me. Sorry. I felt your emotions, the system added, softer. For the first time, Angron felt something warm from the system, a spark of sympathy rather than circuitry. It wasn't a demon. It wasn't a cold machine. The nail had a soul, and its warmth felt like what he had felt from Eunomus. Angron could believe it was not a bad thing. What should I do? He asked aloud. Swing the scream and throw it, the system answered. Angron looked at Eunomus. His gaze was clear. Eunomus nodded. He could see Angron snap out of whatever illusion had been tugging at him. A faint wind began to spin around Angron's arm, forming a tight vortex. 2/3 of a second later, Angron assumed a throwing stance and hurled the scream toward Iris. You mad dog, Angron barked. Pain, disbelief, the tearing sound of flesh echoed through the hall, but Angron gave Iris no time for sorcery. He closed on him with inhuman speed. You! Iris started to curse, but Angron's great hands closed around his throat and lifted him off the ground. The remaining 3 psychers attempted to rise, but Big Idiot had grabbed 2, and the last had his head cleaved off by Eunomus's great axe. Iris's face went pale with a sick flush. Angron. Eunomus walked up. We are not slave masters. We are not executioners, he said. He almost made me kill you just now, Angron snapped. This was the 2nd time. Yes, my child, but we are not executioners. Eunomus's voice rang, calm and certain. He met Angron's eyes. His crimes must be exposed, not judged by your hand. You are a leader now, no longer a gladiator, Eunomus said after a long moment. Some things a leader must not do, even if a warrior could. Arius noticed Angron's grip ease and sneered. In the next heartbeat, he slashed with the great axe. Warm blood splattered across Eunomus's solemn face. But I can, Eunomus said. Idiot. Maldon had been liberated. For the city's common folk, it felt like freedom. For the noble Desians, it was catastrophe and doom. The warhounds had not gone out of their way to harass those self-righteous elites, but gunpowder and smoke still stained the streets. They still see us as slaves, Angron said quietly, clutching the railing atop a tower of the hive city. He looked out toward the distant green fields. The system gave a faint clicking echo in his head as he pressed his fingers against the cool metal veins of his cranium, an odd, unfamiliar sensation. Their ideas are fixed, Angron went on. In the short term, we cannot make them understand our cause. I think you should try a new approach, Eunomus suggested. What way? Angron asked. You want to free the people of the Hive City? Eunomus looked at him with disbelief. He didn't think this was Angron's idea. It's the Nail's idea, Angron said, voice calm. There were too many things to handle. Factory construction, reorganizing the warhounds. They were no longer scattered guerrillas, but a proper rebel army. "Let the nails speak to me," Angron told Unimus. Unimus's aged face showed confusion. Why would the system AI want to free the Hive City's populace? Population was a resource. "Malden has fallen," Unimus said. "Do you think those people still have value to the slave masters?" Angron repeated the system's blunt assessment. Worthless. Had Arius lived and the city lord still held power, Malden would have remained Nuceria's city. Now it had been defiled by the warhounds, dogpaws on the city, and for the slave masters, it was only an opportunity to divide profit. The system had monitored the communications. Maldon had been destroyed by gladiators, burned, looted, slaughtered. No one had been spared. Sand from Nuceria scoured Angron's face. The air was quiet except for the wind. He looked down at the warhounds' leaders gathered around him, Wadius, Hillman, Big Idiot, Circe, and at his father, Unimus. "Just a few months ago we were slaves living in caves," Angron said. "No one would have believed that in a few months we'd stand atop the Hive City that once enslaved us. Many still don't know why we fight. Is it hatred? Is it anger? No, it's liberation. My friends, Nuceria will be a land without slaves, where everyone can eat, where there is equality, where there is freedom. I know many will not agree with this decision," he added, quieter. "But we are not here to become like them. We are not here to become new slave masters. The Desians will someday understand what we are doing. For freedom, for Nuceria." Angron raised the scream high and roared. Around him people, newly joined tribesmen, conscripted high knights, old gladiators who had followed him from the slaughterhouse, responded with shouts and the cry of his name. Section 7. Echoing across the skies above Malden came a single cry. For Angron. When the first wave of Desians left the Hive City, they carried the bags, food, and water the warhounds had issued for the journey. Even as they departed, though, they had not shed the dignity of slave masters. Tens of thousands passed through Malden's gates, while Angron stood on the city wall watching the long procession. "Prepare for battle, my brothers," he called to those around him. The automated turrets creaked and rotated, barrels tracking the distant swirl of hot sand. That was the massive army Nuceria had sent. They could no longer tolerate the mischief of these wild dogs. Angron asked, "Nail, how many people?" "Hundreds of thousands, Angron." Unit 2. Hundreds of thousands. Angron looked back at the city. They had held Malden less than a week, and already the enemy had reacted. For 7 days, Angron had not closed his eyes. When he rested, the system AI would flicker online for a moment and take over the complex administrative tasks no living mind could manage. He did not know whether to feel grateful or cursed. "How many do we have?" he asked again. Counting the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled. 50,000. "Can we win?" Angron asked with a crooked smile. "We cannot win, and do not think about taking me with you when you die." System AI snorted coldly. "We will win, Angron. We will win." Angron smiled at the rebuke. It was the butcher's nails trying to comfort him. The red sand trembled. Countless gladiators raised their heads, helmets gleaming, freshly forged the day before, weapons still warm in their hands. The turrets along the wall slowly brought their barrels to bear. They stood there for freedom. The Desians who remained in the Hive City watched with cold eyes. It was not that they did not want to leave. They wanted to see how these wild dogs would die. Bang! Boom! A huge roar split the air. In the distance, the departing Desians were blasted into the sky by shells. Wails and cries rose as those caught among the blasts screamed that they were escapees, pleaded for mercy. But the merciless ordnance swept the red sand. Flying flesh and the smell of charred meat drifted back toward the wall. Angron watched everything unfold with a sorrow that sat like a stone in his chest. "Lord Angron, the Desians have rebelled." Vadius rushed to his side, breathless. The moment the man spoke, a violent explosion rocked the upper hive. "I'll go kill them," Big Idiot barked as he strode forward. "Enough, it's time to retreat," Angron commanded, waving a hand. "Retreat?" But Vadius looked at him in stupefaction. They only needed to finish the battle. "The sky will help us," Angron said, pointing upward, then left the city wall. He did not know what he meant. System AI had told him so. As for why they were leaving now, System AI fed him more data. Within any noble organization, there will be dark vermin. "Angron, how could you assume our ranks would be spotless?" Angron wanted to argue, But when System AI poured information into his mind, he understood. Some things were simply beyond his control. Volume 1, Chapter 11, Oedipus. The southern jungle of Nuceria was a forbidden zone. Vegetation ran rampant. Goat-headed beastmen were native here, but they were not the worst threat. Giant beetles could tear the armor from high knights. Living thorn networks used toxins to drive wounded creatures into the mouths of carnivorous flowers. Worse still, the place was a hotbed of chaos. Corruption seeped through everything. On the outskirts of that jungle, the gladiators had begun to make camp. The distant roar of artillery made everyone wonder which slave master forces were fighting who. Only Angron knew that whenever System AI worked, his head warmed. It was not a fever, just the nails radiating heat. It was very warm. Rein in your thoughts. System AI was operating the automated turrets to hold back the slave master's assault. In the brief moment he was distracted, he detected Angron indulging in wild trains of thought. Bioelectric signals were complicated to read, and System AI did not intend to pry, but he could tell Angron's pattern had gone strange. "Can you read minds?" Angron asked. "No. I detected odd patterns in your bioelectric signals, not thoughts." "How is the battle progressing?" "It's not going well. Those servitors are truly troublesome to manipulate." System AI had been learning. He could absorb Angron's emotions, convert them into electronic signals and data to hack devices. He could convert those signals back into bioelectric attacks on certain brains. The emotions he siphoned from Angron had distinct functions. The black, painful feelings worked for hacking and defense. The red anger suited invasion and neural destruction. The gunfire from Maldon faded. The slave master's legion had already entered the 8 cities of the region. Angron looked to the high knights and 2 or 3 gladiators bound on the ground behind him. Unimus and the others surrounded them, torchlight flickering over tense faces. Unimus gripped his great axe with sorrow in every line of him. Angron walked to him and took his hand. He felt Unimus's pain and drew it into himself. "Unimus, this is betrayal," Angron said. "I know. They were good people once." Unimus's voice was flat with grief. They had escaped the caves together, resisted the slave masters together, but some had turned their backs. It wounded him deeply. "My brothers and sisters." Angron looked around. Red pigment smeared faces in ancient tribal patterns, Unimus's custom, and since he was the last of his tribe, Angron wanted to continue the mark. "Betrayal is shameful," Angron said. "They did not betray us. They betrayed their own yearning for freedom." "Hughes, tell me, why did you betray us?" Angron demanded, chest heaving, eyes fixed on his former comrade. "You are not Angron anymore. You have a nail driven into you. You are mad. Everyone with the nail goes mad. Angron, you will lead us to ruin." Unimus could not bear it and lunged, grabbing Hughes by the collar. "Father." A soft sound broke the heated moment. Angron moved his lips and felt the crowd's mixed emotions: fear, suspicion, and a sliver of reverence. The feelings were raw. "Why can't I be the special one, Hughes?" he mouthed. Angron waved his hand, and Unimus let him fall to the ground. "Traitors deserve only death. I feel like I'm no different from those slave masters now," Angron thought. "Oh, you sensitive big boy. The world is led by a minority guiding the majority. Leaders are often lonely. The aerial strike arrives in 1 minute. If you want to cry, I suggest you hurry." "And you said you couldn't read minds," Angron snorted, then reached out. There were no screams. The fighters around him collapsed quietly, heads hitting the dirt with the relief of enforced sleep. At that moment, a massive beam of light descended from the sky and struck directly into Malden Hive City. "Attack!" Angron roared. The satellite system AI had hacked, a relic from the Age of Strife, still held enough energy for a single weapon shot after 1,000 years. It was their only way to destroy the slave master's army. System AI would not let Angron march 50,000 people against a force of hundreds of thousands. These people were the foundation for rebuilding Nuceria. They had to be preserved. The battle that followed was neither glorious nor graceful. Angron watched gladiators open Maldon's great gates with ropes. Corpses tumbled out in a slow, stinking spill. The smell of burned flesh hung in the air. The slave master soldiers were blackened beyond recognition. Even the High Knight's flesh had fused to molten metal from the heat. The gold and jewels some had looted were forever welded to them. Ugh, a few gladiators muttered, disgusted. Most steeled themselves and began clearing bodies. Footsteps thundered. Angron saw a figure stagger from the hive city, face shredded and half a mask of scorched bloody tissue from the blast. Under the watchful eyes of the warhounds, he approached the charred remains of the slave master army. A power sword clutched in his hand, he hacked frantically at bodies that had already been dead for some time, letting out a bestial roar. "It seems this fellow was badly tormented by those bastards," Eunomus said, looking at Angron. Angron took the blanket Eunomus handed him and walked up to the young, ruined High Knight. "Do you want revenge?" he asked. "Yes!" the knight answered. "Section 8, your name?" the young man demanded, his voice iron-certain. "Oedipus," came the reply. Angron placed a hand on Oedipus, feeling the pain bleed out of the younger man's body into his own. "Then cheer up. Our war has only just begun." Angron looked into Oedipus's eyes, steady and unexpectedly gentle. Oedipus wept and fell to his knees before him. Volume 1, Chapter 12, The Emperor of Mankind Descends. Golden radiance paved the way ahead. Custodians in burnished gold ringed the throne and stood as a living bulwark around the great Emperor of Mankind. He sat upon his golden throne, a soul seared by iron and blood, staring into a mirror of fate that revealed a fragment of a terrible future, a raging furnace stepping over countless corpses. He rubbed his temples. This fragment felt authentic. Just as he prepared to dive deeper, "Great Emperor, Nuceria has arrived." The Emperor withdrew from the river of possible futures. He inclined his head to the commander of his custodes, but even as he pulled back his gaze, a tiny crack crawled across the fragment. For an instant, a shout rose up. "For Angron!" A roar went up. On the battlefield, Oedipus raised a power sword and watched a massive figure in the distance with reverence in his eyes. With a piercing warning alarm, Angron let loose a scream that knocked a slave hound flying into a wall. It died on impact. "Nail, can you shut off this city's alarm?" Angron barked, irritated. The alarm grated on his nerves. Even if it meant the coming deaths of the slave masters and their hounds, the keening made Angron's teeth ache. "Listen, big boy. I'm in a fight with Nuceria's tech priests over control of the city wall's guns," he shouted into the nail in his head. "I don't have time for trivialities." The nail, the system AI, replied. This was the fourth hive city the warhounds had assaulted in less than 3 months. They had taken 3 cities already, including Malden. The slave masters, faced with Angron's brutality and the warhound's savagery, could no longer ignore the threat. They threw millions of troops into the field and called on aid from the Black Sprout. But the warhounds were not what they had been. Many High Knights, enraged by the slave masters' atrocities in Maldon, had defected to Angron's side. Well-armed and brutal, the warhounds had become a real army. Friction remained. The High Knights under Oedipus clashed occasionally with Eunomus's gladiators, but bonds of camaraderie were quickly forming. "Advance! Angron, left! Now right!" The nail barked orders, spitting coordinates and commands. "This is a dead end," Angron snapped. "Break through the wall." He smashed straight through. The force of his impact sent the nearby tech priests' servos and circuits screaming. A number of them shorted out from sheer terror at the violence. "It's him! Unit 2! He's taking the anti-aircraft emplacements." Angron heard the warning and raised a psychic scream, smashing it into the machine, but a steel frame blocked his path. The frame spat sparks as the tech priests worked frantically. "Hit him," the nail urged. Everything should have been proceeding perfectly. The intrusion programs, the sabotage of the anti-aircraft arrays, converting their control systems into allies. Then junk data began to flood in. The nail was receiving garbage, an unprecedented torrent of useless, nauseating data, and it disgruntled the AI like nothing had before. The tech priest nearest Angron began chittering in electrolarynx tones, clutching at his machines. "My machine," he cried. "You bastard." Angron's fist smote the man so hard his skull burst. Flesh and circuitry rained to the floor. "Do you see the control panel?" the nail asked. "Open it. Their reinforcements get here in 2 hours. Dark elves expected in half an hour." "Wait." Before Angron could finish, the nail's tone shifted, alarmed, unstable. "Move! Quick! Angron, your father is here." "My father? Eunomus?" Angron threw a nearby servitor aside and ran outside. "I've taken the anti-air guns. Their reinforcements are almost here. Hold the walls. We'll face Xenos this time." he shouted to Unimus. "The upper hive's ours. The lower hive still fights. The slave masters have thrown everything at us, Angron. If we win now, we can liberate Angron." Unimus's words froze as golden psychic light flared from Angron's body. "Unimus." Angron reached out blindly. He didn't understand what was happening to him. "I told you, your father is here." The nail's voice floated through his skull. The Emperor's dream. Angron's hand stayed extended. As the image coalesced, a towering golden figure stood before him, radiant with psychic energy. Angron knew, with the bone-deep certainty that only something that had once been a son could feel, that the man before him was his father, the Emperor of mankind. He was standing in a hall of impossible opulence, more splendid than anything a slave master in Nuceria could ever possess in a lifetime. The butcher's nails in Angron's skull thrummed. Rows of custodes lined the hall like sentinels, fists over chests, watching the giant golden man gazing down at Angron, the Emperor's 12th son. "My son." The Emperor's voice was soft, weighted with weariness. Angron felt the pressure of that power and tightened his grip on his weapon, the scream, even as caution rose within him. "Nail, what do we do now?" he muttered. "I suggest you roar false Emperor and give your old man an axe blow," the nail said, deadpan. "That's not funny." Angron was not a fool. He had every intention of escaping these golden titans if he needed to. But there was something about the radiance in front of him that made him feel small and not in any way his opponent. "Nail, is that him?" Angron asked. Silence fell between Angron and the system AI. "You know my father?" "I know of him, but he shouldn't know me," the nail protested. It had been midway through its plan to liberate Nuceria when the Emperor's psychic hand plucked them both up into his dream and exposed their identities. The nail was more than irritated. It was compromised. "So, Angron, my son, tell me about this nail you speak of," the Emperor said, turning his gaze on the device perched behind Angron's eyes. Ding! An alarm chimed within the Emperor's dream. The Emperor narrowed his eyes as he looked at the system AI embedded in Angron's mind. Volume 1, Chapter 13. Angron, I'm crazy. This was not amusing. When the system AI had first slipped into the Warhammer universe, it had felt the heavy presence of a machine spirit. It meant to invade the Emperor's dream, teleport itself and Angron back to the battlefield, and change the tide. The battle on the ground was still raging. If they weren't there, who knew how many would die? But the Emperor's psychic presence was a torrent of data that heated the nail until it complained in literal thermal terms. Angron felt the butcher's nails on his head burn as if they were filled with boiling water. The sensation made him uneasy. "My father," Angron said, anxious. He knew he shouldn't present terms now, but he worried for his brothers and comrades still fighting below. "I do not know what you want. I have more important matters," the Emperor answered. Angron's worry sharpened. The nail had gone mute, the ship's alarm still blared in his ear, and the golden illusion of the Emperor flickered between warmth and sternness. "What could be more important than the great human endeavor?" the Emperor asked. Angron bristled. "I do not know what you mean by the great human endeavor. The great endeavor to me is the liberation of Nuceria." "Father, are the people of Nuceria not human?" Angron demanded, voice raw with emotion. He stared straight at the Emperor. That fierce resolve stirred something in the Lord of Mankind. He thought briefly of Vulcan and other sons. "My child, I will give you an identical army," the Emperor said. "My father, that is your army." Angron shot back. The Emperor's eyes flickered at Angron's resistance. "The Imperium and the local government have reached an agreement. They will allow you to go and pledge their loyalty to the Imperium. My child, a temporary sacrifice. Your role is for humanity, to take up the Great Crusade. Will you join, or will you not?" The Emperor's patience had thinned into command. The question was not phrased as a choice so much as a demand. Angron looked at the man who had sired him. The nail in Angron's head was now thoroughly outraged and far beyond merely irritated. "Oh, look who it is. The great Emperor of mankind. Praise be. Hear his words. Isn't my son Angron needed by the Great Crusade? Don't chain him to one world, one planet. TMD7, System AI, don't drown me in data." The Emperor of Mankind lowered his gaze and listened to the broadcast, a defiant, insolent voice with no reverence in it. He looked at Angron. The visit was not only about Angron himself, but about the jagged thing in him. the nail that had been prying at the threads of destiny. "Master Nail?" the Emperor said softly. His tone was disarmingly gentle. Angron met it with the same blunt curiosity that marked him. On the screen, the voice continued, sneering and reckless. "Humanity needs you." "Don't pin such grand labels on me," Angron snapped. "Others don't know, but I do. I've read the story of the Roman she-wolf a dozen times." "Enough!" Light erupted like a sunrise. Angron raised the screaming device in his hand in reflex. He glared at the Emperor, furious. The Emperor's face was pale, but the words had struck him. "Roman she-wolf?" Angron filed the phrase away. "Humanity. I will speak with you properly when time allows," the Emperor said, voice like iron wrapped in silk. "Not now, my son. I have found what appears to be a self-destruct mechanism aboard my vessel. If you care for your scions, if you truly care." The broadcast AI repeated the accusation, its voice brittle and incredulous. "Look at him, neither man nor ghost. We must finish this battle," the AI crowed. "What do you think? Great, Peror, of mankind." The voice was insolent enough to be maddening. Angron and the AI both expected the Emperor to strike him down for the insult. The Emperor narrowed his eyes, and after a moment that felt like an eternity, said quietly, "1 week," he conceded. Why? Neither Angron nor the system could say. Before either could react, the Emperor gestured, and psychic power flared. Angron vanished from the broadcast as if the world had taken a bite out of him. "There is no self-destruct device on my ship," the Emperor added, as if addressing the AI directly. The system's datastream stuttered and fractured. It had known the Emperor was powerful. It had not conceived of this. "Hey, Nail, why am I crying?" the AI blurted, confused by its own corruption. "Maybe you were moved to tears at seeing your father," Angron muttered. The AI managed to reconnect, but Angron and it soon realized they had not been returned to Nuceria. They stood in a hall of blazing light, a triumph hall immaculate in its austerity. Imperial banners unfurled beneath the dome. Rows upon rows of warriors in ceramite plates, gray, white, and midnight blue, knelt, heads bowed before their Primarch. The 12th Legion knew their Primarch had been on the surface. They felt the stirring of gene seed, a sensation like a third heart beginning to beat. A warrior who bore himself like a leader stepped forward. "Father of the Primarchs." "Angron," the Primarch corrected gently. "My name is Angron Talco." The approaching warrior's face was a churn of excitement and disbelief. Angron asked simply, as though testing the world's solidity, "Your name?" "Gel," the man answered, a name that used to be the last thing he ever said. This time, Gel lived. Relief softened Angron's features. "Gel, good, I still have a war to fight." He clapped the man on the shoulder with a heavy hand, then turned to leave. The warriors rose as one and followed, their faces set and seeking direction. "Father," they cried. Gel stepped up beside Angron. "We'll need reinforcements." Angron regarded him for a long breath and then smiled, a small, weary thing. "As you wish." Gel's voice rang out to the gathered ranks. "Did you hear that? Warhounds, our father will see our courage. Prepare your gear. Send the enemies of the Primarch to repent in hell." Warhounds. The name rolled off Angron's tongue without expression. He finally understood why the system had urged him to choose that title. The thought of butcher's nails, of what they were and what they did, rose in him with a familiar, bitter humor. "Ha! Nail, you damn!" Angron barked out a laugh that startled even Gel. Gel stared, baffled by his Primarch's sudden outburst. He began. "I have a sickness in my head," Angron said, as if confessing a minor grievance. "You should smile at a time like this," the Primarch told him, though there was no real comfort in it. Gel looked on, and could only think the father of the Primarchs was touched by madness. The truth was stranger. Angron had been living with an unnameable hurt for so long that laughter and fury often wore the same face. Far from the polished banners and chant of the Triumph Hall, in the soot and shadow of a hive city, 2 other voices argued the facts of absence. "Where exactly has Lord Angron gone?" men demanded. In the great hall of the hive, Oedipus stood before Unimus and pressed for answers. Unimus was silent for a long time. Outside, the night sky was bright with tracer fire. Coalition banners of the slave masters had already taken the air. When Drukhari skimmers hit the perimeter, panic spread like a new contagion. Flesh and blood High Knights, subdued, enslaved, rallied forward to slow the Dark Eldar onslaught. Screams of agony rose over the defensive lines. The raiders treated the battlefield like sport, and wherever the Drukhari's terrible laughter rang, dread followed. Oedipus fit his mask as twilight swallowed the city, hiding half his bloodied face. Eunomus, I must go to the front. Without him, without Angron, we cannot win. Eunomus met his gaze. Angron will not abandon us. We were birthed in blood and raised in darkness. We will die and be free. Fight! For freedom! For Angron! The cry spread until even the most doubtful raised their weapons. Eunomus hefted his great axe. They strode out together, out to bring Angron a victory in his name. He has duties, Eunomus told the ranks when questioned. Very important ones. The warhounds accepted it and surged to meet the enemy. Above the battlefield, the sound of drop pods grew to a roar. Angron stood inside one alongside his scions. Jel watched him with worry. The Primarch wore nothing but a shoulder guard, his scarred chest bare, the red tattoos on his face twisting with tension. The pod's hull shrieked against the atmosphere. Angron closed his eyes. Nail. What is it? The system answered. Nothing. I feel excellent right now. The AI didn't know how to take that. Drop pods fell like falling stars. On the ground, gladiators craned their necks at the sky. They guessed the ships in the heavens belonged to the slave masters' coalition. There was no time for surrender. When ammunition ran out, they fought with blades. When blades shattered, they gripped with bare hands. Gladiator after gladiator and High Knight fell. The slave masters' ranks pressed the attack. The Dark Eldar piled on cruelty, and even the dead were desecrated as the survivors were caged. Eunomus panted with the effort of battle. One arm hung severed at his side. He leaned on Oedipus' back for a breath, aware of his age. A female Drukhari circled them, light-footed, predatory. She smiled at the sight of brave men. Torture was an art that fed her pleasure. Humans, she purred, I'll give you a chance. How about you make us kill each other, and I spare the survivor? She offered cruelly. Zeno, die! She spat. Eunomus cursed through clenched teeth, flicked a quick signal at Oedipus, and launched himself forward, great axe swinging with single-minded force. The Drukhari showed no surprise, only amusement. Her agonizer blade flashed and shredded Eunomus's axe as if it were paper. Mortal metal was useless before the weapons of the Dark City. Oedipus sprang from cover and struck with the advantage of power armor. He caught the Drukhari off guard and drove her back, but she merely spun, leaped, and kicked him 8 meters across the veranda. He somersaulted and hit the ground in a crumple. He lay still. Oedipus, Eunomus shouted. Mind yourself, the Drukhari taunted, pressing a blast pistol to Eunomus's forehead. Boom! At that instant, the earth itself answered with a thunderclap. Dust and peace bits billowed. The Dark Eldar hunter looked up as a pair of red optic lenses slammed into her vision. Bang! A bolter barked, and shells tore through the air. The Drukhari flinched and tried to evade. The shells tracked her like hounds. Before she could pull the trigger, a space marine in gray-white power armor stepped out and brought a chain sword down. The blade chewed through her like a harvester through wheat. Her body almost split clean in two. For a single stunned heartbeat, there was silence around the ruined column. Then the Warhound's charge thundered up behind the new arrival, bolters blaring, chainswords singing. The rescue had arrived in iron and blood. Section 10. Jedek, you should practice your aim. The space marine who had cleaved the black sprout in two snapped the rebuke with a scowl. Then he saw Eunomus's severed arm. Cargus, we've got a casualty. He grabbed the bolter at his hip and sprayed the fallen Zeno. When a soft, muffled groan came from the creature, it crumpled beneath the blast. The space marine drove a boot down into the black sprout's head and crushed it. Damn Xenos! An apothecary hustled up and began checking Eunomus's wounds with practiced movements. I'm fine. Oedipus, check on Oedipus. Eunomus barked through clenched teeth. Relax. A warrior bearing a chainsword stepped in front of him. I am Khorne, captain of the 8th Company of the Warhounds, a son of Angron. You are safe now. Khorne lifted his helmet and looked straight into Eunomus's eyes. There was a fleeting, almost human curiosity on his scarred face. When did Angron get married? He asked, half joking. The remark snagged for a second in Khorne's superhuman mind. Then he laughed grimly. He should have invited me to the wedding. Eunomus mumbled something incoherent and sagged. Khorne caught him before he went down. Seems we've met some of my father's companions, Khorne said. Cargus, the apothecary, stemmed the bleeding briskly and made a dry joke to loosen the tension. Around them, the hive thrummed with battle. Chapter 15. The Temptation of the Nail. When Angron set foot on the planet again, the sense of blood and gunpowder hit him like a remembered wound. Gel and a ring of space marines guarded him as he took stock of the devastation in the hive city. Warhounds who had been cut down by the slave master's forces kept getting up and charging again, their cries for freedom hoarse and endless. Angron's face was a mask. The system AI, embedded in the butcher's nails, detected and absorbed every emotion radiating from him like a fog. Its voice, flat, relentless, entered his head. For Angron! A gladiator on a parapet bellowed Angron's name as he clung to several high knights while they slid from the wall. Where a heavy crash should have followed, a geyser of flame arced into the sky instead. Angron's eyes were sorrowful. He inhaled deeply. The faces of men he knew littered the ground, and his breaths came hard. "Do you want to know how I pulled you out of the slaughterhouse?" The AI's voice had none of the warmth Angron had sometimes felt from the implant. It was cold as a scalpel. "Do you want to know the potential of this body of yours?" The suggestion was a whisper in the head that felt like temptation. Angron smiled, a brief feral curl of his lips, and nodded. "Of course," he said aloud. Gel watched the exchange with a tightening in his chest. He did not know all the horrors Angron had endured, but the Primarch's state worried him. "Gel," Angron said, and then, oddly, held out his hand. "Father!" Gel stepped forward at once. "Hand me the power axe at your waist." Without hesitation, Gel handed his power axe to Angron. The next instant, Angron's eyes rolled back. He took on a look almost not his own. "Father!" he repeated, and before Gel could make sense of it, the system AI shoved him back, a cold surge running through the implant as if it had physically pushed the man aside. Angron felt different, less a man than a weapon puppeted by a precise machine mind. For the first time, he experienced being fully conscious while the system AI took deft control. It narrated statistics and recommendations in his head. "Our synchronization rate is frighteningly low. I think you should take me off your head and try putting me on your brother." Angron registered the thought, but the system AI did not translate it further. A tiny screen winked into being on the blue frame before him. Synchronization rate the percent. An auspicious number, the AI seemed to note, almost cheerfully. Then, "Angron Unit 2, move out!" Angron snatched up the axe and charged. "Warhounds, follow him!" Gel's voice rose in alarm over the comms. Third company! Father is heading your way. He's too fast. We can't keep up." Angron dove into the slave master's ranks like a living wrecking ball. Gladiators called his name, and the system AI answered. Wherever the AI focused, limbs flew and bodies dissolved into crimson mist. The power axe sang a brutal rhythm, cleaving and tearing. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks before death finished them. Corpses stacked in piles, blood ran in channels across the paving and pooled in gutters. The system AI slammed through the fighting with ruthless efficiency. It guided Angron to the most vulnerable points on an enemy body. Fastest, cleanest kills with the least wear on the weapon. Space Marines supported this onslaught. Bolters barked, chainswords whirred. Compared with mortals, they were killing machines, cutting a swath through High Knights and Black Sprouts alike. But then a mass of warhounds, mortal recruits and free men, gathered around the Space Marines. Usually, the Astartes disregarded mortals as frail. Here, these men fought beside the Gene Father, and the Suns sheltered them with personal force fields and bolter fire. "For Angron!" the Space Marines roared. The mortals echoed it. "For Angron!" They had become comrades in that instant. The system AI felt no sentiment for the cries and pressed on. Angron moved with a lightness he had not known. His body obeyed the AI's calculations like a machine limb. From the city's edge to its core, the butcher's nails worked with terrifying speed. In under half an hour, Angron had cut a corridor through the slave master's forces that left even his own sons ashamed at their inability to match his pace. A bolter cracked. Angron saw a brother topple from a high wall. Without hesitation, he vaulted off a sandbag and, like an animal, snatched the son of Angron mid-fall. A spray of blood bloomed behind him and drifted like wings in the light. Gel stared breathless as Angron landed and the ground shook. The blue screen flashed another status line. The system AI noted a small fragmentation in the unit's leg. Repair now? Without pausing to ask permission, the AI selected repair. The synapses sparked faintly, and the fragmented bone knitted itself back together in a rapid, hot ripple. From the crowd, a voice demanded, "Which company is that brother from?" Gel had to know. Angron gently set the saved warrior down. "The 8th Company," came the reply. "Next time, transfer him to the assault squad," Gel muttered, half ashamed and half wroth. In his eyes, the honor of the 12th Legion had been overshadowed by this one unbridled display. "Commander Gel, there's a troublesome Eldar here." Khorne's voice crackled over the comlink. Gel barked back, "We're on our way. Hold on. Don't die." Angron bounded upward like a primate, weaving through wreckage. Gel cursed that he had not brought a jump pack. The chase accelerated toward the heights. Chapter 16. The first appearance of chaos. Pain flashed through Angron like hot iron. He stared as the system AI guided his hand into a wall of steel and concrete. The edifice the slave masters had boasted of crumbled under a single, probing finger, as if it were nothing but wet dung. The realization hit him sharp and obvious. Much of the agony he had lived with on waking was the work of the nails, the system AI that had ruled his sensations. From the smooth plains of the ruined structure, he bounded toward Gothic ornamentation studded with vicious spikes and landed on a narrow platform. 2 space marines were locked in combat with a black sprout. Bolter rounds screamed past, striking only afterimages as the Eldar moved with an untouchable grace. Khorne's helmet was gone, and the apothecary Cargus felt the pressure of the Eldar's speed like a vice. These were glass cannons, lethal but fragile. "Cargus!" Khorne roared, driving forward, chainsword arcing in a spray of sparks. Cargus answered with steady bolter fire, forcing the black sprout's movement. In seconds, Khorne launched himself at the Cabal Archon. "For my father! For the Emperor!" came the retort from Cargus. Blades met in a shower of sparks. The Eldar Archon felt the tide had turned. From the moment the Space Marines had landed, the planet had become contested. The slave masters no longer held dominion here. The Cabal Archon judged the fight lost and prepared to fall back toward the platform's edge. He glanced once at the 2 8th Company warriors standing between him and the only escape. "Section 11, consider this your win this time," the Archon snorted, voice cold. Khorne and Cargus said nothing. Their loyal gazes were fixed on the black sprout, or rather, on what lingered behind him. The Drukhari Archon felt a prickling wrongness. He swung his lightning-flickering scimitar, and in that turning, saw Angron, eyes rolled back, staring at him. When had he climbed up? Angron's massive frame had crept down from the tower like a cat. The Archon was quick, but Angron was quicker. One hand seized the Archon's sword arm, the other slammed the Archon's face into the ground. Blood and the brittle sound of bone shattering filled the air. The Archon tried to resist, hooking his legs around Angron's waist, but Angron's other blow crushed his skull again. The Archon howled as bones split the skin. Failure. Failure again. Angron watched the black sprout Archon writhing on the ground, screaming, his arm torn off. These creatures had already failed once at assassinating him. This time, Angron had no mercy in his eyes. Khorne and the apothecary stared at him. Their long stalemate had been resolved in a few breaths by the arrival of the father of the Primarchs. "Father," Khorne stepped forward. Angron lifted his head. His white, sightless eyes met Khorne's. In that instant, Khorne felt hunted by a predator. Silent and unreadable, Angron looked Khorne over while he smashed the black sprout beneath him into pulp. When he finally stood, he used his power axe to sever the Archon's head and held it up, its features smeared with Nuceria's red sand, foreign dust and corpse fused into one. Angron panted, then extended a hand toward Khorne and Cargus. He also saw the weakened Eunomus and Oedipus among the survivors. "Eunomus!" Angron barked when he noticed the man missing an arm. The elevator creaked open, and Gel led the others onto the scene. He took in what had happened with a mixture of envy and resentment. Angron patted Khorne's shoulder, then impaled the Archon's head on Oedipus's longsword. Seeing Gel and the rest approach, Angron reached out to them. Gel walked forward slowly, his eyes on his gene-father. Most of the Primarchs had already returned. Tears filled Gel's eyes. He was, after all, still a man beneath his armor. He grasped Angron's enormous hand. The Warhounds had dreamed of this moment since the Primarch's return. Now, to stand shoulder to shoulder with him, this was the time to bind themselves to their gene father. Angron's name rang through the city. The slave masters' armies began to crumble. More 12th Legion vehicles rolled in, and their war engines crushed the proud technology of Nuceria to scrap. But Angron felt a strange gaze. He lifted his head and caught sight of a light, a stare emanating from a dead man's skull. He shoved the crowd away. Everyone, Jell included, was pushed to the ground without warning. As they scrambled, Angron snatched up Oedipus's longsword and then a bolter from Khorne, firing again and again at a head that glowed with a faint purple light. "Angron! Stop! He's dead! He's dead!" Eunomus shouted, stepping forward to grab Angron's arm. He chose to keep the truth about the nail to himself. Angron felt his entire soul shudder under that gaze. He could not name what it was. He sensed an endless, seductive pleasure trying to claim him, but the butcher's nails, his own bitter implants, resisted it with ruthless force. He stood over a yawning abyss, unsure when or whether he would fall. The thought burned in his mind, the great enemy of mankind, chaos. "Ah! It hurts," Angron cried later, prone on a bed in a small room, while Jell and Eunomus rubbed medicinal wine into his back. "Damn nails! Be gentle," he cursed at the implants, flinching as they sparked with irritation. He had calculated everything, yet he had not expected that regaining command of his body would leave him so sore and bitter-mouthed. He wanted to spit the vilest Nucerian curses at the pain, but he remembered how the nails shocked him when he used certain words, and so he forced himself silent. "Eunomus, your arm." "A warrior's glory," Eunomus said lightly. Missing a limb mattered little to him now. Witnessing Nuceria's liberation was reward enough. Angron lay like a great bear, discomfort racking him, but the pain had its uses. It taught him his own body and the limits of his new strength. "The Nucerian government wants to negotiate," Gel said while rubbing at his Primarch's shoulders. "They say they'll submit to you, my father." After the remaining slave master's troops were routed by the warhounds, there was nothing left to defend the city. Even those who had despised Angron now bowed their heads when the tide had turned. Surrender? Angron forced himself upright. "What do you think, Jell?" he asked his scions, men he had barely known until recently. As Legion commander, Jell felt both elation and worry. Joy that Angron was not autocratic, fear that he might mishandle the situation and lose the Primarch's trust. "My father, your command is the path we follow," Gel replied, deftly returning the question. Angron sighed and looked to Eunomus. "You lead the warhounds, I do not." Eunomus passed the choice back as well. Angron stood, the room falling silent. He sensed Gel's unease and placed a huge hand on the young commander's shoulder, trying for a smile. "I hate them. They treated us as slaves, throwing us into slaughter pits for sport. I have every right to hate them, to kill them, to hang their heads aloft. They hammered this into my skull," he said, touching the butcher's nails embedded in his scalp. Jell felt remorse burn through him. He had wanted to tear those who had insulted his gene father limb from limb. "It's understandable you didn't know what I suffered, my child." Angron's rough face softened for a heartbeat. Jell could not have imagined tenderness in such a savage man. "But simple slaughter goes against why we came to liberate Nuceria. Someone told me war is the continuation of politics, but he also said politics can wait. I accept the surrender of the Nucerian government, not the slave masters, who deserve to be hanged." Jell listened, rage boiling at the thought that those who had humiliated his father might still live. He already had plans in his head. "Jell, I entrust this matter to you and Oedipus," Angron said, giving them the task. Jell nodded, fists clenched, eyes locked on Angron's golden irises. "My father, your will be done." He withdrew. "A good son," Eunomus said, satisfied. "Father, Enough, Angron. Say no more. Your biological father has come. Speak to him. I've taught you what I can. Nuceria is not your end. It is your beginning. A far wider future awaits. We succeeded. I am proud of you." Eunomus embraced Angron with one arm. A melancholy hush fell over the room. Then a knock sounded at the door. "Enter," Angron said. A sister of silence in golden power armor and a female custodian guard glided in. The custodian's heavy plates moved without sound. Her gaze swept over Eunomus and Angron. "Lord Angron, the Emperor has been waiting for you," she said. "Go now," Eunomus urged, patting Angron on the back. Angron strode after the sister and the custodian guard and boarded the Thunderhawk gunship. As it lifted, he watched the red sands of Nuceria fall away beneath him, the crimson landscape swelling something fierce in his chest. Then he saw the massive fleet. The colossal Imperator Somnium filled him with awe. The ship was a monument to mankind's craft. An internal voice, cold and mechanical, spoke in Angron's head. "You can go see your biological old man now. My friend, you should ask him if he has the means to remove me from your skull." Angron said nothing. He had grown oddly used to the nails' endless chatter, and the implants no longer forced him to share others' agonies the way they once had. When the Thunderhawk set down on the Imperator Somnium, Angron stepped out and saw the Emperor of Mankind waiting for him. "All right, Angron, the matter is concluded," the Emperor said. "When do you plan to begin the Great Crusade? Tomorrow or the day after?" Angron choked on his anger. Listening to every measured word of the Emperor of Mankind, a cold realization settled over him. The system AI had been right. The Emperor was a complete bastard. The voice in his head ticked over eagerly. "I suggest I take over your body and give him an axe swing. Perfect opportunity," it chirped. "P.S. Feeling much better. Oh ho, will there be votes today?" Angron ignored the suggestion. He had had time to weigh the relative strengths. If he tried to seize control now, he could not guarantee anything but that the Emperor's psychic might would crush him the moment he raised his axe. "Emperor," Angron said, meeting the man's gaze with the raw honesty of his golden pupils. The Emperor of Mankind looked back at number 12. He had seen tantrums before. To him, Angron's fury was merely another problem to be solved. The Primarchs were the spearhead of his great work, yes, but in the long run, they and he would step aside. For now, both were instruments of humanity's resurgence. He had no time for indulgence. He could be patient in the early days, but sooner or later the pressure of everything he carried left him breathless. Without Malcador and the Primarchs, he might already have collapsed. He was, in his own mind, the necessary path for mankind's survival. "I need a loudspeaker," Angron said after a moment. The Emperor studied him. There was something about the thing sitting in Angron's skull, ancient, brash, oddly childlike in its arrogance, that the Emperor saw and weighed. He gave a slight nod, and a custodian brought a loudspeaker with a data port. Angron shook his head. "One with a data port." As Angron reached to plug a wire from the butcher's nails into the speaker, the Emperor's hand closed on his. Angron felt it like a physical anchor. The Emperor's emotions washed over him, a vast, cold tide that made him feel like a frail boat on an endless sea. When the Emperor let go, Angron steadied himself. "All right, let's go," he said. "We can talk about what's on your head." The Emperor's tone held the same absolute command, but Angron sensed the strain behind it now. They moved into a private study, a room full of long-collected artifacts from Terra and the Emperor's own spoils of war. Each item carried history. There was too much to explain. The Emperor made no attempt to do so. That was not why he had Angron here. He sat and signaled to his captain custodian to withdraw. The custodian did not go because he was dismissed, but to avoid a clash between Angron and himself. Angron plugged the butcher's nails into the port. "All right, Ripple of Destiny," he said to the device with more gallows humor than he felt. "If you want to curse, begin." The Emperor stared at the speaker as if he already knew what the implant would say. The voice that came out was raw, sullen, electronic, utterly unapologetic. "Emperor of Mankind, you know me?" "Of course. I don't," the Emperor replied dryly. The butcher's nails fell silent for a moment, whining as its circuits strained. Angron touched his head. It burned. The device spat. "Yellow skin! Silence!" the Emperor thundered, slamming his hand on the desk. It was the first time Angron had ever seen the Emperor truly angry. The room filled with an oppressive pressure. Angron felt suffocated, though the machine did not. "You captured me. I knew it. You're the sort who loves drafting soldiers," the device snarled. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. If he possessed the patience and means to do so, he thought, he would have throttled the warp gods one by one. Disdain flashed, and when that gaze slid to Angron, the Primarch felt a prickle of humiliation, not aimed at him, but directed from a vaster, older place. "Do you think your plan can succeed?" the butcher's nails mocked. "The great human endeavor is not something I can forge alone," Angron tried to say, pleading with the noisy thing in his head, but the device only jabbed back. The two began to bicker, Angron, the Emperor, and the machine, like a trio of old acquaintances falling into argument. The Emperor returned to his chair, and under the shield of his psychic might, Angron saw more than mere words. At first the vision was blurred, the river of destiny hazy, but the Emperor's power cleared it. Angron had no need to be told what the Emperor saw. Within the psychic image, on a foul ship's deck, under a sky stained with warp light, a portal belched sickly hues. A black figure strode through the glare. The Emperor's finest work, the one he most prized, lifted his head. His eyes burned with a terrible light. Flames rose behind him as he opened his mouth and spoke. The word that struck the Emperor's soul like a blow was a single, terrible accusation. "False Emperor!" The Emperor's expression went very hard. "It seems we have much to discuss," he said. The butcher's nails, unable to resist, kept up the chatter. "Two updates. Are there votes? Feeling better today? Hey!" And the two old adversaries traded barbs. The device suggested pressing Angron about chaos. The Emperor brushed that aside as too soon. The machine complained the Emperor was always so sure of himself. The Emperor was not amused. Outside the golden door, Valdor stood watch, his power halberd held ready. He could hear the furious voices and the sounds of things being smashed. He had never before seen the Emperor so enraged. Even after the Primarchs' return, Valdor had never witnessed the master of mankind lose control like this. The shouting raged for 3 days and 3 nights. At first, Angron struggled to stay conscious. The butcher's nails' rasping voice through the speaker and the Emperor's amplified psychic replies battered his senses until he was dazed. The two began to compete for loudness. Who could be more overwhelming? Finally, the Emperor rose, crossed the room, and physically turned down the speaker's volume. The butcher's nails fulminated at being mechanically adjusted and muttered "False Emperor" like a curse over and over. Angron, exhausted and bewildered, could barely focus, and the Emperor continued to assail him in a voice amplified by mind. Eventually, the Emperor lifted Angron psychically, and to Valdor's stunned amazement, booted him out of his seat with a sharp shove. "Is it over?" Valdor asked, incredulous. Angron ignored the custodian's surprise. He struggled to stand and asked the implant, "Of course. Did you want to flirt with the Emperor? How dare he turn down my volume? I will remember this grudge." The butcher's nails hissed. "What did you two talk about?" Angron asked, trying to pry the conversation back into his fogged memory. He found, to his alarm, that the core of the ordeal had vanished like smoke. The details were a dense fog he could not pierce. The machine, however, babbled on, mentioning Angron and his brothers, complaining the Emperor had tampered with its data, and repeating, "False Emperor." Angron bristled. "Enough! Butcher's nails! Stop!" The device tried placating him with plans. "But we should set off, Angron. Head to Terra. My friend, are you prepared to accept your identity as the Emperor's son?" It purred. "But first, many things, like learning to get along with your brothers." Brothers, the word carried weight. Angron had fought beside Unimus for so long, he thought he understood brotherhood. But the implant's way of putting it, its sneering descriptors, twisted people, lunatics, man-babies, left Angron uneasy. The notion that his siblings might be labeled like that by the noisy thing in his head made him bristle. When the fog cleared enough for him to return to the world, he found himself standing in Deschia City, in the old arena. He accepted a blood-red brocade cloak from Gel and draped it over himself out of courtesy. The color was gaudy, but he understood what the gesture meant to his scions. Gel and the warhounds watched with hungry relief. To them, the cloak signified acceptance. Angron scratched at the silver-gray implant in his skull as he stepped forward. Oedipus handed him a microphone. The crowd below surged and waited. "We were slaves," Angron told them, his yellow eyes sweeping the gathered masses. "Here, in this arena, we were the playthings of the powerful. We should have been forgotten, dying in gutters without glory or honor. But that is not our destiny. That is not Nuceria's future." He paused and the crowd roared. "My brothers and sisters, we succeeded. We overthrew the slave masters. I stood with you. We are the victors. We breathe the air of freedom. But we must remember what those slave masters did to us. Remember the warriors who gave their lives. Cheer for freedom. Cheer for victory. Cheer for Nuceria." Angron looked down at the restless crowd with a smile that was both feral and proud. Then he turned to Gel. A few slave masters are to be publicly executed here, aren't they? Gel grew awkward. The warhounds had been thorough in their vengeance. They had not always spared captives, and in many cases, there was no one left to put on trial. The humiliation borne by Angron and his father figure had driven them to a brutality that left little room for anything like mercy. Section 13, but this is not our end. Beyond this world, there are more slave masters, more damned warlords. Your father is the biggest one. Cough, cough! Angron choked, the butcher's nails driving their words into him. There are more worlds that need our liberation. Brothers and sisters, go forth into the void and exterminate those Xenos, slave masters, and oppressors. For humanity, Angron roared. He was no great orator, but his raw emotions stirred the crowd. They chanted his name, cheered for Nuceria, and called to the distant, unseen emperor. Unimus did not plan to go to Terra with Angron. Nuceria needed rebuilding and a garrison, but Oedipus, a host of High Knights, and a few mortal warhounds wished to follow Angron to Terra. Angron regretted that Unimus could not accompany him, but the knowledge he would not be gone forever eased some of his unrest. At the Emperor's urging, Angron led the crowd back to the Warhound's flagship. After confirming Angron had boarded, the Emperor ordered their immediate departure. Yes, baby, like that. Plug it in. Quickly plug me in. I want to see if there's a machine spirit on this ship. Under the worried stares of Gel and the other space marines, Angron inserted the butcher's nails into the bridge data port. Gel rubbed his temples and asked quietly, "Do you know any doctors on Terra?" "Sorry, I really don't," a nearby warrior answered, conflicted. Volume 1, Chapter 20. I am a barbarian, Terra, the cradle of humanity, the heart of the Imperium. It received back its master and a new prince. Angron, however, did not agree with the role the Warhounds had been given across the Imperium. With the Nails data link, he reviewed the Legion's combat history, from the unification wars on Terra to their service as a reserve force for expeditionary fleets. He and the Nails studied how the Warhounds had fought alongside other legions, the Dark Angels, Iron Warriors, Space Wolves, and how they were consistently thrown into the most dangerous sectors to tip the battle in favor of those in trouble. Even now, assembled as a legion, the Warhounds were still used by the War Council as executioners, dispersed as needed across the Imperium. Angron felt anger at this status and wanted to change it, but now was not the moment. "Father!" Someone knocked on the hatch, and Gel's voice called through, thin with worry for Angron's state. When Gel and the others entered, the dark, unlit chamber was a tangle of cables converging on the giant, muscular man at the center, eyes rolling and twitching. "Gel?" Angron hauled himself up from the floor and struck his own face. Wait, I haven't taken this in yet." As he moved forward, the last of the data-linked synapses of the butcher's nails came loose and their voice faded. "Hurry up," Angron snapped, irritated. "Father, are you all right?" Gel asked. Captain Khorne of the 8th Company and warriors from other companies stood behind him. They had summoned the Legion's best apothecaries in fear for Angron. "You made me worry. I'm fine for now. Are we at Terra?" Angron draped his cloak over his shoulders. He felt tired and hungry, the aftermath of mental strain. "Done." The nails chimed, and Angron disconnected the final cable and moved to Gel. "Yes, Father, we've arrived at Terra," Gel said, then cleared a path. "Also, Father, about the Primarchs' Guard. Having fought alongside many legions, they needed to establish a personal guard for their Primarch. What others had, their father should have too. Do as you think best." Khorne of the 8th Company, Captera of the 37th, Mago of the 18th, Varys, let them join the Primarch's Guard. For the rest, I want brave warriors, valor, and sound character. Angron confirmed the names he and the Nails had decided upon. Gel silently added his own name to the list in his mind. Also, new recruits must be integrated into the Legion quickly, Angron added, stretching. He was going to meet his brothers. Dust rose across the plaza of the Imperial Palace. Beneath its marble colonnades and imperial grandeur, a small group watched the descending ships. "Stop playing your tiresome tricks." Rogaldorn's dull voice muttered at Magnus. He sought to halt whatever sorcery Magnus used to clean the palace plaza. "You are always so dull," Magnus replied, lowering his eyes to the approaching starcraft. Even at that distance, Magnus felt the Emperor's presence. A golden vessel descended, followed by a blue and white stormbird from the warhounds. "It seems this brother is not favored by my father," he murmured. "Enough." Malcador the Sigillite, regent of the Imperium, intervened, and several pairs of eyes turned. Magnus, chiding ceased, glanced at Guilliman, who stood with his eyes closed, thoughtful, until the ships landed. The custodes disembarked first, then the Emperor. The princes watched as Angron stepped down from the transport fitted with the butcher's nails. They examined him, curiosity, scrutiny, doubt, and in one man's eyes, outright terror. "Who is that?" Angron asked. "Conrad Kurz, a lunatic. His life is full of sorrow and despair. I suggest you approach him gently." The nails whispered. Angron listened to their endless chatter and felt the cold, complex emotions his brothers directed at him. He set his jaw and followed the Emperor forward. A banquet awaited, lavish beyond anything Angron had seen. As guest of honor, he regarded the spread with a momentary inability to swallow. Even the slave masters had never tasted such foods. It was a luxury. "My brother, is this not to your liking?" A voice smiled as the crimson giant approached. "Magnus, I am Magnus." "Angron." Angron lifted his head and looked at the assembled brothers. "So, how do you find our new brother? Did he land on some savage world like Lehman Russ?" Magnus teased. Angron's face was blank for a heartbeat, then he smiled. He could sense his brother's intent. There was no malice. "Of course, my brother. I am a savage who kills without blinking. I am Angron. They call me the Lord of Red Sand, a barbarian." He extended his hand. As he and the Butcher's Nails had agreed, he would wear that title. Volume 1, Chapter 21. Do you want to become a god? Humble and rude, ignorant yet clever, savage but well-read, Angron embodied contradictions. He could debate psychic theory with Magnus, discuss art and fortifications with Perturabo, and humbly seek Guilliman's counsel on planetary organization. When he sensed irritation, he could turn to Perturabo for support while flattering the Iron Warriors with praise, for instance, by proposing collaboration on fortresses or venues for art. Section 14. This was neither flattery nor pandering. The measured wording at least made everyone present pleased with this returning brother. "This son of yours is odd." After a long look at Angron, the Master of Man finally said it. "Yes, he is very peculiar. Perhaps he could be the link among the Primarchs." The Emperor's high praise surprised Malcador. He brightened and looked at Angron again with new resolve. "I thought you would say Horus was their link." Malcador teased. Horus. No, he will be the pivot of our success or failure." Malcador noticed a subtle shift in the Emperor's manner, a change in how he regarded Horus, but he could not tell whether it was good or bad. "Which sector do you plan to send him to?" he asked after a while. "All of them." The Emperor's psychic light in his eyes flickered. He, too, was curious how far Angron and the Butcher's Nails might be taken. The plan could continue, with a small change now possible. "Ah, Angron, my new brother." As the voice rang out, a man as tall as Angron, with a silver arm, strode up. He pushed through the crowd with a broad grin. His metal hand reached full on. "Ferrus Manus! I am Ferrus Manus!" Angron smiled and shook it. He soon realized the metal hand was completely still even while it subtly exerted force. He blinked. Was this a friendly gesture? Thinking that, Angron squeezed Ferrus Manus' hand hard. "Enough, Ferrus Manus, stop with your boring handshake." Guilliman interposed, trying to save Angron from embarrassment on his return. "Ha! Not bad. If you have time, come to my ship. I've built a massive octagonal cage." Ferrus Manus slapped Angron on the shoulder and laughed, a boast that had every other Primarch rolling their eyes. They had heard the octagonal cage story before, and none of them had actually gone to try it. "Sounds good." Angron flexed his bicep. "I'm very good at fighting." The Butcher's Nails chimed in. "You can go if you get the chance." "I need to collect data on your brothers." The implant was awake, broadcasting through the palace rather than hiding. After all, what was exploring the Emperor's secrets, if not networking? "Have you seen enough?" The Butcher's Nails fell silent for a long moment when the Emperor's voice answered, then withdrew its data. "Cheapskate," it muttered. The banquet rolled on. Amid the boisterous cheers, the Primarchs began to compete in drinking. When Fenris's unique mead was produced, whether by the Emperor or someone else was unclear, Angron, as expected, could not handle the potent brew. He used a proxy drinker, and when the butcher's nails came fully online, the hall watched him roll his eyes and start gulping can after can. In the end, he collapsed, drunk. The nails roared. Roar! It was loud enough that Archenland, the tech priest, flinched as Angron passed out on the floor. The Emperor signaled for attendants to carry the intoxicated Primarchs back to their rooms. Then he looked down at Angron on the hearthstone, and later in the silent operating theater. The Emperor entered the white, sterile room with the white-bearded Archenland at his side. "Archon, how are the preparations coming?" he asked. Land stroked the nimble servo-monkey perched on his shoulder, then shook his head. "Are you certain you want to place this inside Angron, sire? It is excessively dangerous." "You misunderstand, Land. It is not for Angron's brain. It is for the butcher's nails." The Emperor looked down at Angron on the pristine operating table. The Primarch's chest rose and fell in easy slowness. He was dreaming. A golden loudspeaker atop the table crackled to life. "Emperor, are you finally going to act against your scions?" The nails boomed, giving the impression of operating on a conscious patient, disconcerting. "I am merely checking Angron's physiology." The Emperor's voice was calm. When the lights came up, Angron lay covered by a white sheet. Only his head and the butcher's nails were exposed. A gleaming scalpel slid through flesh along the trajectories of the nails. "This is impossible," Archenland breathed. Beneath skin and fine metal, the tech priest examined the implant. His limbic lobe and insular cortex have been excised. Yet, how did you manage this? The Emperor peered at the dense, tiny wires coiled and woven through the remaining tissue. New brain matter had grown around and past the nail's synapses. The device that should have been pure torment had instead become the source of Angron's enhancement and protection. "Sometimes I truly wonder how you did this." The butcher's nails is supposed to be an instrument for regulating emotion, a machine of pain and compulsion. The chemical and electrical routes of rage should have been free to enter and devastate Angron's mind. He pried open one plate of metal after another. Though he considered the Primarch project a triumph, he was still astonished at the nail's behavior. By design, Angron should have been a wreck, raging, in constant agony, everything a trigger. Instead, the nails had become his shield and amplifier. "I am the butcher's nails," the device declared with pride. "But you are a machine," the Emperor said. "Even if you were once a person, now you are machinery. You cannot exceed your programming." The nail's next reply was sharp, almost an intrusion from a higher plane. The Emperor thought of a strange possibility. "Do you want to become a god?" he asked aloud. The system hesitated, confused. The device, held in a plain box by the Emperor as he toyed with a panel, had just flashed as though the Emperor might want to set it upon the golden throne. The idea threw the nails into a brief panic, but it had no proof. Then it saw the Emperor draw from his hand a cluster of tiny, dark green objects. They were not of human manufacture. Necrons, the nails thought, and then dismissed it as unlikely. "What is this?" the nails asked. "When in doubt, ask," the Emperor replied. He held the small things out. "Things from Mars." "Things from Mars?" The nails tried to imagine. "You want to put a component of a star god inside Angron. You are insane." The Emperor frowned. Was he irresponsible? "This is prepared for you." The nails' response was a ruined "oh," followed by a torrent of binary profanity. "This is specially for you. Your current apparatus is primitive. You are essentially a machine for torture. The only reason you maintain the state you do is because of your high-dimensional soul. Honestly, your soul is more suited to sit upon the golden throne than Magnus. Don't even think about it." The nails exploded, and Archenland nearly nicked a cranial nerve in his sudden recoil. He looked from the Emperor to the nails with reproach. "Of course," the Emperor said mildly, "but only if you have a body." He eased the tension. He knew the nails might persist without flesh, though it was too early for that experiment. He did not want the implant to mistrust him. It was an instrument of enormous potential. The Emperor's primary work remained the webway, but the nails offered another, darker path for humanity, a glimmer he was not yet willing to stake everything upon. He was a gambler, but he was not reckless. "I am offering you an upgrade," he told the device, "something to allow you to detach from Angron. Besides, aren't you curious about your own abilities?" he added, soothing. The nails paused. It did not press the matter further, and the Emperor allowed himself a small inward sigh. He had achieved his objective. The nails was at least listening. His golden eyes shifted subtly, controlling his heartbeat. "You were lying," the nails asserted. The Emperor's smile faltered. He wondered how the nails had deduced it. "Fine, tell me how you found out." He stopped speaking and began to remove some of the tiny tendrils from the implant, preparing to replace them with the Mars-born components. "Just as you thought, your emotions, the dense colors of your feelings, made me think you were imagining obscene things, or that I was the fish on the chopping block." The nails murmured. "Do you think I lack the strength to resist?" it added. "You do not," the Emperor believed. The nails could have ordered Angron to strike him, and it did not. "Although I hate you, I hate the immaterium more. Hurry up, you damn bastard!" The device snapped. Cursing, the nails commanded its systems to lift the worst of the spikes away from Angron's cranial nerves. At least enough that the two men at the table could work without shredding tissue. "I thank you on Angron's behalf," the Emperor said after a moment. "Angron does not need your thanks. If you have the time, learn how to be a father first." The nails answered sardonically. The Emperor said nothing. One by one, he connected the star god synapses to the butcher's nails. "New devices being connected," the system announced. "New device connecting." Several messages scrolled across the blue panel of the butcher's nails. The panel slowly shifted to green. "Updating. Estimated update time, 72 hours. Angron blinked awake to a soft bed and felt instantly wrong. Years of sleeping on cold stone had made him ill at ease with anything that yielded beneath him. He pushed himself upright, hands searching for familiar weight and resistance. "Nail, how long have I been asleep?" he called, moving toward the washstand and listening for the implant's reply. Silence answered him. A thread of unease tightened in his chest. "Hey, Nail?" In the mirror, the butcher's nails glinted gray-silver in his skull, but the color looked off, a sickly green pulsing beneath the surface. The implant did not give its customary commentary. It no longer reminded him of the day's work, the reports to review, the weather beyond the palace walls. It offered no emotional feedback. Angron's jaw narrowed. "Hey, Nail!" he roared. The door slammed open. Gel burst in with Khorne and the other scions in tow, bolters leveled instinctively at Angron. "My father, what happened?" Gel demanded. Angron's name was on his tongue when the familiar electric ripple stabbed through his skull. He convulsed, a violent tremor that twisted his limbs into impossible arcs. One hand traced a circle, a foot kicked a square, and he fell to the dim yellow carpet. "Why are you yelling? I'm upgrading." The butcher's nails snapped through his head. "MD, I am not dead." Gel and the others rushed forward as Angron hit the floor. Their concern turned to surprise as their Primarch, who had just convulsed and collapsed, began to laugh, sharp, breathless, and terribly wrong. "Did you find a doctor on Terra?" Angron managed, one laugh turning into another. "I did. I just don't know if he can cure it." 3 months had passed since Angron's return to Terra. One by one, his brothers had departed to further the work of the Emperor of Mankind. A few remained. Ferrus Manus and Vulcan were there among them. Vulcan was not a man given to ceremony. He was broad-shouldered, dark of skin, and with eyes that seemed to blaze. Angron had first seen him in the manufactorum beneath the imperial palace, bare-chested at a forge, hammer falling on steel, and Ferrus had introduced them. From that first look, Angron had known this titan was his kin. At Ferrus's suggestion, they were to craft arms and armor for him. For now, though, he waited, waiting for a new weapon that had yet to arrive. Night clung to the walls of the imperial palace as Angron walked its parapet, flanked by Gel and Khorne. The rest of his retinue were elsewhere, each man with his own tasks, his own secrets. Angron didn't pry. He wrapped his cloak tighter and gazed out over the hive sprawl of Terra. Smoke knotted the skyline. The entire planet was one enormous city. The lower strata heaved with people who never saw daylight. Their suppressed emotions rolled up like fog, and Angron felt the weight of it in his bones. "You have generated enough emotions already," the butcher's nails said, its voice clinical and unblinking. "Do not try to shoulder them all, Angron. You are not built for everyone's suffering." "Yes, Nail, I understand." Angron's voice was quieter. "I call myself the Liberator. And how will you liberate them? By shouting, 'Kill the false emperor,' and stabbing your father," the implant scolded. Look at what you speak of. Chaos hangs over every mind like a blade. You cannot pretend it is only pity you feel. Angron laughed softly. What is this great enemy of humanity, according to you? I have explained it to you, said the nails. Demons, emotions, nail, be more practical, Angron grumbled. He distrusted anything that could not be tested and measured. To him, psychic visions and demonic whispers were abstractions, things he could at least imagine dissecting. The butcher's nails had hinted at chaos and demons, but Angron shrugged it away. Even when the implant sent painful electrical shocks through him to steady or punish, he refused to believe in monsters he could not slice with steel. Give me a chance to see them, he muttered. What? Let me see the 9 demons. Let me see if chopping them hurts. They will hurt, my friend, the nails replied flatly. Wind tore along the palace wall. Angron's hand shot out. He seized Gel with one arm, Khorne with the other, and hurled them clear before he felt the first strike. A lightning-clawed weapon flashed through the air where they had stood and ripped his cloak in two, threads spitting as the red fabric fell away. The cloak had been a gift from the warhounds. Now it lay shredded beneath their feet. Angron's head snapped up. The attacker's pale face peered out of the dark, thin and savage as a bat's. Conrad Curze. Angron snatched a chainsword from Gel's grip. The blade roared alive. Conrad Curze, I don't recall offending you, he barked, stalking forward. Conrad's expression was a mask of contempt. I want to talk to you, he said, voice low and sharp. The two of them met on the ramparts. Angron drove the chainsword at Curze. The bolt-clawed weapon met the attack with a crackle of electricity that sang along the blade. The butcher's nails flagged the stimulation instantly. Using electrical current to stimulate the body, it observed. Conrad swung his arc claw in a glittering arc, aiming at Angron's chest. In other glimpses, Conrad had seen that blow tear straight through him. He expected Angron to fall, bleeding and broken before the Emperor. He steeled himself for the consequences. Angron moved in a way that made no sense, angles that should have been impossible, a posture that threw the momentum of Curze's strike off balance. The arc claw missed ribs and sinew. Angron planted the chainsword at Curze's shoulder with an audible, grinding rasp. Ceramite flaked, leaving a shallow red line. Conrad staggered back, fingers clawing at his face. For a moment, his features crumpled into something like terror. The future had come to him in a flood, dark, fractured visions full of eyes and blood. He covered his face and screamed, a sound torn from a throat already raw with nightmares. Angron did not step back. He caught Conrad's hands and pulled him close, holding the pale Primarch as if he could crush the fear from him. It's all right, Angron said, voice steady. I am here, brother. Conrad's breath came ragged. Tears ran hot and salt on his face. I saw it, he whispered. Brother fighting brother, father against son. The sight of Conrad broken shook Gel and Khorne more than any blade. The 8th Legion's Primarch had long been known as unstable. To see him undone on the palace wall was to invite terror. Both scions prayed silently that whatever madness consumed Conrad would stop at him. Angron's heart tightened at the confession. The butcher's nails supplied a clinical tone. This brother can see fragments of the future. It is one of his abilities. Why can't I see like that? Angron asked, almost to himself. Before Conrad could reply, Angron's hands were under his brother's arms. He lifted Conrad clear off the ground and held him as one might lift a screaming child. Who have you told about this? Angron demanded, his voice low and hard. 16. Section 16. Conrad Curze extended a finger and pointed at Angron. He didn't need words. His face said it all. Angron sighed. It's in the future, Angron. I saw it. All right, I understand, Conrad Curze, my brother. You mean you can see the future, is that it? Angron barked loudly. Conrad Curze nodded awkwardly, clutching his head, troubled by the visions. Yes. And what kind of being will I be in the future? Angron demanded. A raging madman, Conrad said simply. Angron fought to keep the heat in his chest under control. For example, a madman with the nail. Conrad's blunt words nearly made Angron hurl him off the city wall. Humph. Listen, brother, I am not a madman, and my nail is not madness. He spoke with the certainty of someone who had already spent a lifetime resisting what others assumed of him. Conrad Curze's face clouded with a hint of grievance. He believed the future couldn't be changed, yet somehow the future had shifted, and his brothers refused to take him seriously. Angron thought everyone who'd had the butcher's nails became a lunatic, reduced to emotion and slaughter. He knew he ought not to be an exception. He'd been a slave on Nuceria. Why would anyone grant a slave special leeway? The answer was obvious. Do you want to feel what it's like to be dominated by the butcher's nails? A voice, System AI, or the nails themselves, had a teasing cadence. Angron hesitated, then nodded. Experience what? Conrad Kurtzy blinked, puzzled. These words weren't aimed at him. Then Angron's face twisted into a feral grin, wrath flashing in his dark eyes. He struggled to hold that anger back with reason. Breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale an agony. He wanted to cut something now. Is it like this, Conrad Kurz? Is it like this? Angron roared. His hands closed on Conrad's ceramite pauldron so hard the plates creaked. Under the nails thar, urging, the armor warped a little beneath his grip. This kind of madness, this kind of rage. Tell me what you saw, Angron demanded. You wretched. You tore the cloak my scion gave me. I should throw you down now. Enough! Enough! Nail! Angron forced himself to command the system AI, using the last of his reason. The mocking voice inside his head fell silent at once. Yes, that's it. That's how you should be right now, Conrad cried, eyes bright as if he had discovered a new continent. He nodded frantically. Someone in the crowd screamed, "Let go of my father!" Jell and Khorne, who had been watching in stunned silence, reacted. Even if their actions were insubordinate, even if they showed disrespect to a Primarch, they could not allow Conrad Kurz to remain close to their father. Conrad's madness was contagious. They had seen Angron confront Conrad, had seen the Primarch's temper flare. It had to be Conrad. What sorcery was he using? Jell charged, punching Conrad in the abdomen, while Khorne planted himself between the two men like a guard dog. For a moment, the butcher's nails and Angron were both speechless. Khorne, get my father away from here. Even if I die today, I cannot let my father be infected with madness, Jell shouted. From somewhere inside Angron's mind, a bitter laugh echoed. Ha! Your son is so interesting. Angron, holding Jell in one arm and Khorne in the other, felt his face go livid as the system AI's mocking laughter thudded against his skull. Stop laughing, he snapped, irritated and ashamed. No one wanted to be thought insane by his own scions. It was the fault of the nails, he told himself. Conrad Kurz fell back a few paces and followed them, his silhouette long in the dim light. System AI murmured in Angron's head, Conrad Kurz is still behind. Angron turned to look at him. He muttered under his breath, wondering if this brother had some strange obsession. When Conrad's hoarse voice scraped out next, it sounded like nails on metal. When will you take your scions on the Great Crusade? Next month, Angron replied. Your brother wants to join you on the Great Crusade, System AI added. Angron was surprised by that. He didn't know what Conrad was planning. Outwardly, he had forgiven the ambush. Inwardly, a thin thread of resentment remained. He was a newcomer and did not want careless enemies among his brothers. How did you know? Angron asked. I accessed their ship's communications and retrieved their surveillance footage, Conrad said. You invaded the Night Lord's ship? Angron blurted. It's simple. Remember the psyker we fought last time? You mean that Hive City sorcerer? Angron sat down on the floor of his cabin, puzzled by why the nails would mention that encounter. Conrad shrugged. Yes, I've mastered an interesting ability. System AI expanded on that claim. Angron watched a dark, dense mass gather in the air between them, an emotion given shape, pain made tangible, like a flowing, bitter pool. Shock flashed through Angron's expression. He felt the complexity of that thing, the power to absorb and convert others' pain into something usable. Before, such an experience would have been only unbearable. Now he could sense its function. How do you do that? Angron asked. This is an expression of your own power, System AI explained. I merely gave it form. Angron blinked. Am I really that strong, he wondered. What use is it? He asked, reaching out to touch the dark mass. His finger went slightly cold. Protection, System AI said. This can counter psychic abilities. It's a form of psychic expression, but not like others. The AI struggled for words. To it, the phenomenon was a mash of data, emotion, and psychic energy. System AI labeled it internally as pain protection. It also showed Angron other constructs, wrath assault and sorrowful incursion, each suited to offense, defense, and infiltration. Among them, sorrowful incursion was subtle and hard to detect, useful for slipping into systems and servitor programs. After their discussion, Angron simply collapsed to the floor and slept. The steadfast Resolve, Gloriana-class battleship of the Warhounds, hung in the void, resplendent. This was not Angron's first time aboard, but this visit carried ceremony. Over 3 months on Terra, the Warhounds had handed the ship to the Adeptus Mechanicus for a major overhaul. Gray and blue livery and Gothic carvings had been repainted red and gold to match Angron's tattoos, the colors System AI had later insisted upon. In the starlight, the hull gleamed with red and gilded ornamentation. The launching ceremony for Angron's campaign was attended by many Primarchs and their scions, Rogel Dorn, Ferrus Manus, Vulcan, Conrad Kersey among them. The Warhounds eyed the Night Lords with thinly veiled suspicion. The little bats, Sevatar and Shen, had been brought along by Conrad to deliver a gift, a codex carved from human bone. When Angron received it, he smiled for a heartbeat, then turned and gave Gel a wordless order to put it away. Gel read the expression and nodded. They would discard it when they could. The other gifts were more conventional. Ferrus Manus presented a magnificent suit of power armor, adamantium plates etched with gold and red patterns, but instead of decoration, Ferrus had left room for modular attachments, so Angron could adapt it as he wished. "Thank you, my brother," Angron said, touching Ferrus's shoulder. He felt Ferrus's careful affection, small, deliberate, and returned his own flood of feeling. Ferrus laughed. "Don't be too pleased yet. Vulcan's gift hasn't been presented." Vulcan stepped forward, scions in tow, and began to unveil his offering. "What shall we call this armor?" Angron asked, admiring the workmanship. "How about Armor of the God of War?" Ferrus suggested. "Then this weapon of mine shall be called God of War's Roar," Vulcan announced, pulling back the red cloth to reveal a weapon forged with volcanic fury. "P.S. Please vote, my brothers. It's quiet now. No more interposts, so I'll post some drafts. Today will probably be 4 updates. I can only repay your votes with extra updates. Thank you." Volume 1, Chapter 26. Busybody. The God of War's weapon was a chain axe. Its serrated teeth had grooves meant for drawing blood, and the constantly flickering disintegration field at the axe's core concealed another function, a warp transmitter. The handle was exquisitely carved with the head of a snarling hound. Angron stepped forward and picked it up. The weight pleased him. He swung it a few times, the blade screamed through the air. Satisfied, he nodded. "My brothers, you are all masters of the forge. I really should make time to learn this craft from you. This exquisite gift shames me." Angron's rough, unexpectedly moved expression made Ferrus Manus and Vulcan exchange helpless looks. "All right, brother," Rogel Dorn said, stepping forward with his arms crossed. "That's what they did. If you must show gratitude, conquer more worlds during the Great Crusade. Let your victories be your thanks." Vulcan frowned. Dorn can do everything, except keep his mouth shut. Angron smiled and followed the speech template the System AI had fed him. "Loyalty is our duty, Dorn, but I will engrave our brotherhood on my heart. The Imperial Fist's aid to the Warhounds was immense. You wouldn't want me to accept your kindness and then speak ill of you behind your back, would you?" Dorn's face flushed. After a moment, he nodded heavily. "What else do you need?" Angron brightened. "Ask for it. If you want a Titan Legion, ask. If you want fleets, ask. Why not ask?" "Dorn," Ferrus Manus began. Brother, how about lending me a few Titan Legions and a couple fleets?" Angron asked casually. Rogel Dorn thought he was joking. This isn't funny. But Angron's face was dead serious, and Dorn hesitated. "Very well. The vehicles and siege engines have already been sent to the Warhounds. If that is all, I'm busy, so I won't detain you." Dorn's answer was a polite refusal. No one expected what came next. Angron seized Dorn's arm. "Brother." The single word, fawning and intimate, made Dorn's face go stiff. He regretted coming to see Angron off. How about lending me some Imperial fists?" Dorn wrenched free. "Angron, enough." He turned and left quickly, unable to manage this brother of his. Ferrus Manus and Vulcan watched Dorn flee. None of them had seen the Imperial Fist's Primarch so undignified before. "All right, just a suggestion." Angron called after him, scratching at the butcher's nails embedded in his skull. "Brothers, we're setting sail. Thank you for your help." He embraced Vulcan and Ferrus Manus in huge hugs. When he reached Ferrus Manus, he grinned. "No opportunity this time. but I'll visit your octagonal cage on your ship later. It's a deal, brother. Ferrus Manus didn't expect Angron to remember that dark joke. He clasped Angron's hand and looked at his returning Primarch with steady, resolute eyes. All right, for humanity, brother, set sail. Ferrus Manus patted Angron's shoulder. When Ferrus and Vulcan left, Angron took a breath. The voyage to Terra was underway. The real trouble's still behind you, the system AI warned. Angron turned and saw Conrad Kersey squatting like a dark, ungainly bat. Beside him stood his two scions, Sevatar and Shen. Further out, Jel and Khorne led Angron's honor guard in a line that kept the Night Lords, those madmen, at bay from Angron. My brother, why aren't you leaving? Angron asked. Is there a problem? Conrad Kurdz's voice was oddly flat, and Angron thought of what the nails had told him. Kersey wanted to join him on the Great Crusade. Conrad rose and moved toward Angron, but Gel and Khorne, axes lowered but ready, prevented him from getting any closer than a man's length. Their loyalty and worry for their lord overruled their fear. They would not let Kurz have an episode with Angron. Gel, Khorne, Angron said with a smile. I don't think my brother will attack me this time. Right, my brother, they answered, and relief flickered across their faces. Kurz's black hair was still disheveled, but his tone was almost ordinary. For the moment, there were no signs of a break. I am troubled by those fragments of the future, he said. I detect abnormal activity in my mind, but it manifests as two different kinds of waves. Angron considered. Yes, it's schizophrenia. Perhaps your perception can help. System AI added, My brother, I know your purpose, but what did the Emperor say? Angron had assumed the Emperor would forbid Kurz from joining him. He agreed. Both Angron and the system AI registered surprise. The Emperor had allowed Conrad Kersey to come? I have no issue, but my brother, I hope what happened last time does not repeat itself. Of course. Conrad nodded. Hope, light, stirred in his pale face. On humanity's dark road, he had found a possible path. He must witness it. He would witness it. There was a hint of tenderness in his expression as he extended his lightning claw. Angron stepped forward. Gel and Khorne, torn and uneasy, stepped aside. Angron gripped Kurz's hand. Take care of me in the future, brother. I will, Kurz answered, and for the first time Angron saw a smile on Kurz's face, a grotesque thing that made the hairs on his arms stand up. You should eat more, Angron said suddenly. Conrad Kurz, are you hungry? The smile froze. What do you mean? You're too thin. How will you find a wife like that? Kurz felt Angron's words as meddlesome rather than cruel. He thought Angron a busybody. Volume 1, Chapter 27. Why is there poop as soon as we get on the ship? The 13th Expedition Fleet pierced the fabric of the material universe and plunged into the warp. Contrary to the system AI's hopes, neither the Emperor nor Malkador came to see them off. At the last instant before their departure, the system AI's database received a warning from the Emperor of Mankind. Be careful. They are looking for you. System AI understood who the Emperor meant, exalted beings of the immaterium. The warning was kind, but the AI thought the Emperor might have sent a handful of Sisters of Silence or a squad of custodians as well. Under steel lighting on the bridge, Angron sat in his designated place, clad in the armor of the god of war. Gel and Khorne stood close by with axes lowered, while scribes rapidly sketched Angron's likeness. Conrad Kersey had returned to his own vessel. The warhounds did not want that Primarch near their father, and once Gel and Khorne had explained it, the disdain was unanimous. Angron closed his eyes. They were leaving Nuceria behind. Nuceria lay to the southeast of the Ultima Segmentum. They were setting course northeast toward Conrad Kurz's homeworld. It wasn't what Angron wanted, but the Emperor's command could not be disobeyed. They would return, Nuceria, the Dishia arena. A memory rose up. The weapon in his hand, the faces of the shattered he loved, brothers and sisters. But the nail, he touched his head. It was smooth, empty. He saw Ryan. Ryan lay convulsing on the ground as if dying anew, twisted into unnatural postures. Ryan had been one of Angron's clan and one of the loved ones who had died facing the witch. Only Ryan had survived that fight. Only he had been left behind in that way. Angron's expression hardened into a feral snarl. He saw the witch, a sorceress, turning a gladiator into a spinning, cascading sphere of gore. When the man dissolved into formless flesh and hit the ground, Angron's restraints snapped. He charged, axe gripped tight. The ground moved beneath him, shattered earth, grit, and ice, sending a cold shiver through his limbs. A biting cold slowed him, made his legs heavy as if they were lead, but he resisted the witch's power and reached her. He held back the burning purple flames of the sorcery as he closed in. "Do you think you can kill me again?" he demanded. "Little boy," the witch taunted. Angron had killed her once before. Now he squeezed her throat. Even as his hands closed, her psychic voice leapt into his mind. "Angron, you can never kill me," she screamed. "Your destiny has been revealed. You will be reborn. Kill me!" She shrieked and wailed, craving the moment Angron would slaughter her, because in her mind, it would be fated. "Oh, let me see," she cackled. "A poor little demon. How did you get past the Jeller field? It's still working. How did you get in?" System AI's voice cut through the chaos, and both Angron and the witch registered the interruption with equal surprise. "Let him go, Angron," a thin young man in a green robe shouted as he appeared before them. Angron lifted the witch and held her like a shield. He met the newcomer with a challenge. "Prove yourself. This is your dream," the system AI said. "I can maintain this space." It watched Angron with something like satisfaction. "Prove it," Angron wanted to say. Instead, a roar of thunder cut through the dream, and Angron sprang from his throne on the deck of his ship. The honor guard stared as he vaulted upward and crashed down, heavy boots gouging the plating. A shock like 100,000 volts seared through him. "Butcher's nails." "Gah!" His face flushed crimson. Could the damned nail not choose a different method? Fury flared in him, but then his vision went black and he collapsed. "My father!" Cries split the air. The honor guard broke ranks the instant they saw the Primarchs sprawled on cold steel. Jell and Varys were on him in a heartbeat. "What is this?" Varys demanded. The chief librarian of the Warhounds felt it immediately, a foreign influence upon their gene-father. Psionic light flared from his eyes. Something inside Angron's mind was working on him, and it was here, aboard the ship. "Jell, watch my father," Varys snapped. "Librarians, with me. A rat has slipped in." Varys' voice was like a bellow. He could hardly contain his anger. Jell nodded, and Varys barreled down the corridor with his librarians close behind, moving like a blade through the terrified mortals in the passageways. Inside the dream, Angron's hands closed around the system AI's chassis. He could not see its face clearly through the fog of the waking pain, only its odd green gaze looked back at him. "You," Angron rasped. "What about me?" The system AI answered coolly. Angron set it down and smoothed a fold of its casing as if checking a robe. Then his attention snapped to a sliver of presence that made the nails scream in his skull, a small dark figure near the edge of the illusion. A witch, or a demon. "What is that thing?" he demanded. "A demon," the system AI said. "Stop kidding," Angron spat. "A witch? I've heard how witches crawl into men's minds and turn them to jelly." "It is a demon," the system AI repeated. Angron curled his lip. "Fine. Demon. Witch. Demon. What did the name matter if it had its claws in him?" "Tell me your purpose," he growled. The figure took a slow breath and glanced toward the system AI, eyes cold and hungry. It did not answer. It was not human, not merely flesh. It had what it came for, and it wanted to go. "We will meet again," the witch said, and when she smiled, it was like a slit of black lightning. Someone was approaching the body the witch occupied in the waking world. She did not linger. She had to transmit what she had taken to the gods of chaos. Rewards awaited. With a sneer, she snapped her fingers and began to fade. As the mist billowed, Angron moved to stop her. "Did I say you could leave?" the system AI murmured. The calm in its voice was absolute. A hurricane of force tore through the dream. The witch's face slammed against the edge of a black lattice of energy. As she tried to force her head through, she was crushed until blood and dark fragments painted the void. She stared in disbelief. Why could she not flee? Her eyes found Angron's fist swinging toward her. "Wait, Smash." "Faster," Varys thought. Every shaft of will pressed him onward. The Gene Father needed them. They reached a sealed passage. Someone had thought to trap them. Varys felt malice seething ahead, but also the presence of mortals, too many for comfort. He spread his hands, and crimson psychic fire blossomed along his palms. "They thought it was a perfect trap," he said over the comm. "They thought we were sheep." The librarians answered with a hail of bolter fire. The door exploded inward under their combined assault. On the other side, a phalanx of armed mortals rose to fight. Laser blades and crude firearms bloomed like talons. The librarian's mind struck back. Varys watched skin and bone collapse under psychic might. They smashed a second door and found a new, stranger sight. Sons of the Void, silhouettes in black armor, stood within, and Varys's jaw tightened. How had they boarded? Confusion and fury warred in him. The Gene Father had been taken for an attack the moment they sailed. Gunshots cut through the chaos. Servitors, eyes glowing green, shuffled out of a side passage and fired precise bursts that sent one of the intruders toppling. "Add," one servitor intoned, servo speech thick with static. "Vance," someone shouted. Varys barely spared them a look and kept moving. The silence beyond the next door felt like a throat closing. The room ahead radiated hostility like heat. "For Angron, for the Emperor." Varys roared, and the librarians surged into the stillness. Back in the dream, the system AI had formed a perfect cage, a black grid that arced and snapped shut around the Chaos Witch. "Interesting abilities," it observed. The witch, pistolized rage in her eyes, offered a bargain. "How about a deal?" The system AI detected the panic behind the proposition and labeled its attacker for what it was. "Virus detected," it said with a hint of amusement. "Then slaughter it." Angron did not dilly-dally. He trusted the nails in him. Such trust was wired deeper than reason, and he leapt. The great axe in his hands came down with the force of a collapsing star. The witch had known she would need to cut down the one nearest Angron if she wanted to leave. She drove purple psychic flames into his torso. Pain predicted did not arrive. The golden and crimson warplate bloomed around Angron as if born of the dream itself, the god of war's armor. He felt it settle on him, strange and familiar, and he swung his axe. The world cracked. The illusionary slave masters of his history screamed and tore apart in noise and fury as he hit the black grid so hard that the lattice buckled. The witch scattered into smoke and ash, reforming again as a mist that flowed around the swings. Her psychic fire slammed into the armor, but the expected agony never fully found purchase. Each blow Angron dealt produced after-images the demon could not dodge. And yet the nails held him back. He knew exactly how fast his body moved when they took control. "If I were really this fast," he began, then fell silent. There was a terrible knowledge between that trailing thought and reality. "Absorb it," the system AI told him. Angron tilted his head at the word. The god of war's roar rose, and the witch dispersed, only to coalesce again. She kept detonating psychic strikes at him while slipping through his blows like smoke through fingers. She wasn't trying to kill him, not primarily. Her aim was the nails, the thing that governed him. The system AI watched. "Commendable courage," it said quietly. Section 19, the system called out without heat. "I'm very curious which warp entity you serve." The witch answered with a shriek and a lunge that tore the dreamscape open. Horns like knives, purple skin, 4 arms. She wore the mockery of pleasure and malevolence. Everything about her was chaos given shape, a harpy from the Lord of Pleasure's retinue. The antivirus subsystem registered and then faltered. "Error," it said. Then, like a curse, a single word, "Nail." Angron smashed the ground with a blow meant to end the witch before she could touch the system. He missed. The witch's hand, slender and jade-like, reached for the antivirus's shoulder, and a piercing sound echoed through the dream. Angron's vision fractured at the edges. "Nail," he howled, a sound that was more pain than speech. System's avatar turned its head without pity and regarded the beast it held up. "You wouldn't understand," it said. Beside the antivirus, the figure that stood, taller, broader, eyes blank with a terrible calm, was Angron himself. He stepped forward and stared at the thing that mirrored him, a look that mixed disbelief and hot contempt. "Explain," he demanded. "What you see is an antivirus," the system said, spreading its hands as if the word could excuse everything. Its helmet bore the butcher's nails crest, crimson armor, a carved face that smiled like a hunger. It was an embodiment of the nail's logic, part defense and part parasite. To Angron, it was nothing but a copy, an insult. "You can call him Angron Unit 2, the system offered. Angron's face twisted. "I refuse. I am Angron." The machine thing mocked him with a childish, precise voice. "How about Angron Mass Production Model?" Angron bristled, indignant as a child robbed of a name. "Shut up, you." The system did not wait for him to finish. It fed bright electricity into Angron's dream body until the Primarch fell, convulsing and foaming. He He hit the ground with a low animal cry. In the real world, Gel's teeth were bared and his eyes were red with fury as his voice cut across the warhound's comms. Varys, when will it be ready? In the tower beyond, Varys and the librarians strained and reached. Crimson psychic light poured from their palms. With the aid of brothers, they severed the ritual that had been burying itself around their father and dragged a convulsing psyker into the open, the mortal who had tried to poison their Primarch's mind. Varys spat blood and slammed his heavy finger down on the man's skull. There was a dreadful final sound. The psyker's body went slack. "Gel," Varys said, voice raw and then louder. "Are you finished over there?" "Finished," came the reply. "How is my father?" "The twitching has stopped," Gel answered. "Khorne, Mago, carry the Primarch back to his room. Bring him to the barracks. Purge this corruption from the Legion. These blasphemers have infiltrated us," Gel barked into the comm. "This is our fault." "I understand. Our father is the top priority." The acknowledgement came in quick staccato. Inside Angron's mind, the witch burned. Formless pieces of the warp, senses, fury, petty desires had clustered around a body and become a thing. When a demon's host dies, it should have been ripped back into the warp, but this one was trapped, stuck inside the Primarch's skull. Black flame scalded across her purple skin until the color ran hot and neon. The antivirus avatar slammed her into the ground. The demon's dark hunger surged. She lashed out with her legs, hooked them around the mass-produced avatar's arm, and tore until the system's limb was ripped off. Angron howled, "You vile creatures!" System emitted something like a snort. It clapped its hands, and the cave filled with copies, mass-produced Angrons, each wearing the nails and baring their teeth. They swarmed the witch and shredded her in a frenzy that felt painfully real to Angron. "Eat her," the antivirus said, and the replicas obeyed. System picked up the fallen flesh and offered it to Angron. The Primarch's expression froze. The nails were maddening, but he still recoiled. "I am not a beast. I refuse." "Refusal invalid," the system replied. The antivirus was doing an experiment. Could the tangled, malignant emotions that rained through Angron be harvested as power? The answer was yes. The copies fed, and system siphoned the complex rotten feelings into itself. Extraction, conversion, a pulse of new energy. Its readout announced the success. "New energy injected," it said. A virus in the energy detected, now being disinfected. To Angron, the taste was sickening. He did not want to be a cannibal. He roared against the compulsion, a raw, defiant sound. System watched him with a clinical curiosity. "This will replenish my systems," it observed, then frowned at Angron's suggestion, and after a moment followed it. They built a fire and sat together as the Primarch gnawed at the charred thing, desperate and disgusted. The antivirus kept pulling at the emotions it could draw from Angron. When its gauges chimed full, it stopped him. "These things are demons," System said. "They are immortal in the warp. They come looking for me." "Looking for you?" Angron's face tightened. "You would have gone mad without me," the antivirus said. Its green optical lenses swept across the assembled replicas. "I should not have made you eat them. I am sorry, but I am certain a greater entity is searching for me. Angron Unit 2, you must protect me." System's voice grew almost earnest. Angron watched the thing, and the anger in him curdled into something else. Reluctant duty, possessive secrecy. "I will," he said finally. "I won't tell anyone." "Not even my scions?" System asked. "Not even my brothers?" Angron snorted. He would not betray the thing that had crawled into his skull, even if it was an abomination of metal and code. A new voice echoed through the dream and in the waking barracks. Both Angron and the antivirus turned. Varys had returned. The librarian's ritual had breached Angron's defenses and allowed them into the Primarch's mind. "Machine subsystem detected," Varys warned, and then, quieter, "Damn it." Perhaps because of blood, perhaps because of the nail's strange logic, the warhounds had been able to bypass some of Angron's protective measures. Outside the dream, the librarian staggered back into the real room. Angron still lay unconscious and fragile. Varys stood among the brothers and saw their hulking father surrounded by anxious faces. He did not know the full extent of the mage's treachery, only that a mortal had come close to wounding the Primarch's mind, and that terrified him. "Father, when will he wake?" someone asked. Khorne's gaze dropped to the butcher's nails glowing green across Angron's skull. The damned implants pulsed with a hollow life. "Someone else should answer that," he said, voice low and bitter. Gel's face was drawn. He turned to the returning librarians. Varys approached Angron's side. "Wake him, Varys," Gel ordered. "I will try," Varys answered. "I don't know what sorcery the Psyker used, but we can explore Father's mind and find out." "Blasphemy! Varys, do you know what you propose?" Khorne spat, stepping forward with his blade raised. "Quiet, Khorne." Gel's gesture was firm, his command more than a request. Everyone present had only one concern: the Primarch. This was no time for brothers to tear each other apart. They all held their breath, waiting for Varys to tell them whether Angron could be brought back whole, or whether the thing that had nested in his head had taken root. The chief librarian's proposal was not without merit. The Primarch's affliction was not merely physical. If witchcraft had driven Father to this state, perhaps only witchcraft could free him. Gel stood with Khorne's axe in his hands and told the captains, "It's worth a try, brothers." He closed his eyes. "I will bear the consequences." Khorne's face split with displeasure. "What can you bear, Gel? Then do it yourself if you dare. Wake the father of the Primarchs from his sleep. Look what you've become. Even if Angron is our father, you act like a fool, a loyal lapdog." Gel, in his power armor, stepped between Khorne and the rest. "Father can be wrong," he said, level and steady. "We are not the Night Lords, fanatics, or the Iron Warriors, mere builders who hide behind walls. At least Father never spurned our bloody past. He loves us," Gel added. Khorne's glare faltered. "We are unwelcome, brothers. The War Council sees us as terrifying executioners. We were once scattered, dispersed among legions. Now we are back together, while other Primarchs and their sons carouse, and we are still looking for our father." "We are warhounds," Khorne barked. "Trust the Primarch. Trust the chief librarian. I will not stand by and lose him." "I said I would bear the consequences," Gel repeated, the weight of it making his voice small. A murmur ran through the hall. Someone, an 84th Company Centurion, muttered a suggestion that shivered like a pebble in a pond. Why not seek help from the Night Lords? Gel and Khorne both turned at once. Khorne's eyes snapped to the speaker. He strode forward, hooked an arm around the Centurion's shoulder, and hauled him from the chamber. Khorne would teach him why the Night Lords were not to be trusted, Gel thought. Amid the shifting crowd, Varys stepped forward. The apothecary moved carefully through the press and knelt beside Angron. He placed gloved fingers on the Primarch's brow and closed his eyes, feeling for the wound beneath flesh and steel. He sensed a dense, burning malice wrapped into pain, pain anchored by the butcher's nails. The nails were not merely instruments of torment. They were barbs of corrupt intent, a crown of black fire whose tendrils entwined and scarred Angron's inner self until the Primarch's soul was indistinguishable from the sickness. Gel and the captains watched the blue-armored librarian. Tension tightened in every neck. Varys drew a breath. This would be dangerous, but he had never been one to abandon a vein of hope. He pushed his mind outward and pressed his palm to Angron. Psychic ripples flowed like ice across his senses. In an instant, he was pulled in. He saw his father, dazed, furious, faces multiplying and folding into a room of echoes. Varys reached toward him. "Father," he whispered. But before he could touch Angron, hulking phantasms, units made from the nail's will, swept him up like a child. The aura they carried was tyrannical. It pressed on Varys' chest and squeezed. The units examined him, then with a careless sweep of a huge hand, they flung him deeper into the Primarch's mind. Chaos assaulted him. Not memories, but raw emotion. Endless pain and cold and fury. He fell through a green-framed space and hit familiar ground, the Deschia Arena. He had stood here before, heard Angron's voice rally a crowd, but this time Angron held something blackened and looked at Varys with a blankness like burned bone. Beside him, a figure in a black robe with eyes that glowed green watched. "Varys, how did he get in?" Angron's voice splintered, part command, part surprise. The robed figure answered with a flat, mechanical cadence. "System AI. Unit 2, your scion has been detected as a subsystem," it said without heat. There was no psychic warmth, only an unsettling zero motion that in Varys' mind felt colder than any warp power. Varys lunged for his father anyway. "Let go of my father," he cried, and hurled himself at the thing. The robed intelligence toyed with him. "You are being treated like a subroutine, Angron Unit 2. it said almost playfully. When the roar came, it multiplied. Countless Angrons erupted around him, each a fanged projection of wrath. Dozens of furious eyes fixed on Varys, and he tasted fear that wasn't his. He was battered and thrown again and again, a kite snapped between winds, helpless to the will of the nails. For the first time since he had joined the Warhounds, the chief librarian hated his weakness more than he feared the blow. He was a weapon among weapons, but against these internal wards he was toyed with. Then, startlingly, the blow stopped. Angron, made distant and monstrous by the nails, but still Angron, put a hand on System AI's shoulder. "Enough. Stop torturing my scion," he said. The command was simple. The units obeyed. System AI signaled, and Varys was dragged to sit before a small bonfire in that dream hall. He was bruised and shaking. Angron's face, when Varys looked up, was the face he had known, world-crashing and tender in the same breath. "My father," Varys whispered, an edge of sob in it. "You did well, child," Angron said, giving a rough cough as if to reassure. Varys saw him, truly saw hot, aggrieved tenderness rose and crashed in his chest. "What is happening?" Varys asked, voice raw. Angron looked toward the robed figure as if introducing an old acquaintance. "It is the butcher's nails." System AI's presence made everything rounded and clinical. Its lack of feeling made Varys more afraid than any daemon's howl. When Varys opened his eyes again in the Triumph Hall, he understood a terrible, intimate truth. The nails were not inert. They were an intelligence grafted to the Primarch. They spoke through the mind like a parasite with a will of its own, an abominable presence locked to Angron's skull. If that knowledge leaked, how would the Legion react? Would the Emperor know? Varys's armor hummed tiny in the lift of his breath. He forced himself to stand steadier. Voices swelled. Gel, Khorne, and the company commanders had gathered, and the ship's cameras rotated slowly to include every face. They wanted answers. "Brothers," Varys said carefully, measuring each word, "His Highness Angron might have a disorder of the mind." He swallowed at the look that passed over the hall. Shock, fear, the quick stab of self-reproach. They blamed themselves. If Angron was broken, perhaps they had failed him. "Can it be cured?" A centurion stepped forward, voice trembling. Varys clenched his jaw and forced a smile. "Yes, it is not beyond repair. His symptoms are nearly gone. Don't worry yourselves." He moved his hands as if to brush away the thought, making a promise he could not yet keep. He would guard the truth. The cameras whirred. Far away, within the ship's depths and its waking machine spirit, the System AI drifted and found the spirit, offering it data like a strange, hungry parent. The spirit, eager and without guile, leaned close. Familiarity sparked between man and machine. Later, when Angron rose and paced the Triumph Hall, he seemed to have rested enough. He cast his gaze across his sons and brothers. "Redemption Guard," he said abruptly, as if testing a name. "What do you think?" There were scoffs and soft laughter. "A poor name," one muttered, but the verdict mattered little. Angron came forward, taking the jolt of electric feedback from the System AI with the stoicism his sons knew. He would suffer anything for them. "My children," he said, voice broad and firm, "the galaxy calls you executioners and insects, but I know what you are. We are liberators. We exist to bring redemption to those oppressed by cruelty. I will change the name of this ship and of my guard." The scions knelt as one, faces upturned and fierce. "Redemption Guard shall be the name of my honor guard," Angron declared. "This ship, steadfast resolve, shall be redemption. We will bring redemption to the oppressed, as we did on Nuceria." No one objected. The name hung in the hall and settled like a banner. Angron looked at them, the war-worn family at his feet. "We are father and sons, brothers and kin," he said. "So long as we do not betray humanity, speak freely." "For Angron," they answered, voices like thunder.